One Piece Supreme Control, Chapter 121-140. Chapter 121 Learning Domineering. Luo's pupils shrank, and at this moment, his whole body shook violently, and he was greatly shocked. There was a huge eye-catching wound on the woman's forehead, and blood was gushing out from it. It looked miserable, her pupils were wide open, and the sarcasm could be clearly seen. She, self-destructed, Luo said dumbly. K-Lassen clenched his fist suddenly, then let it go. He said in a serious and heavy tone, "Go quickly, you will be discovered if you don't go." Saying that, he took Lola away, carrying the chunky Tianlong man on his back. Luo's face was dark, and he took a deep look at the woman who fell to the ground, and quickly followed Corazon out of here. The voices of the two were completely invisible to others. It wasn't until 5 minutes later that someone quietly looked up and found the woman lying on the ground, but the dragon man disappeared that day. Tianlongren, gone, but why is there no sound coming out? This strange scene has become a mystery that confuses thousands of people, but no one knows it. In the dark alley, Corazon panted and threw the unconscious Tianlong on the ground, making a dull sound. This dead pig is really heavy enough. Corazon let out a heavy sigh, realizing that Luo was in a bad mood, and complained deliberately. Luo was in a downhearted mood. The woman only said 3 words, but those 3 words kept echoing in his mind, making him look complicated. At the same time, unwillingness and anger rose in his heart, and this unwillingness and anger turned into a raging flame, burning his whole body uncomfortably. Only by death can you be free. This heavy sentence made Luo close his eyes tightly. What's wrong with this world? There were many thoughts in Luo's heart. He didn't understand, and couldn't understand it. A minute later, he turned around and saw the Tianlong man who had fallen asleep on the ground. His eyes shrank suddenly, and his fists clenched tightly. An uncontrollable anger rose from his heart, and this anger burned so violently that his whole body trembled. It's all you. It's all you. Luo strode over. The hatred in his eyes was terrifying. He bent down, and then threw his fist violently, hitting the Tianlongren in the face. Luo! Corazon shouted, and Luo stopped. The bubble on Tianlongren's head shattered with a pop, and the pain on his face made the corners of his eyes tremble and he woke up. When he opened his eyes and saw Luo and Corazon, he was stunned for a moment, then reacted immediately and screamed in horror. Corazon's expression changed and he snapped his fingers. This guy can't be discovered. Corazon said solemnly. Kidnapping the Tianlong people is such a big sin. It is conceivable that if other people know about it, I am afraid it will not take long before the generals of the Navy headquarters will come here, causing an uproar. Luo's face was cold, and his anger made his fists very irrational, and he threw his fists down. Bang! The Tianlong people let out a scream, and their nosebleeds splattered. Luo continued to fight, and his 2 fists kept hitting the latter's head and body. Let the latter continue to howl, and it is miserable. Corazon narrowed his eyes slightly, then sighed, ignoring it. Aren't you high above? Don't you treat everyone else as a beast? Luo roared angrily while beating. Who would have thought that you were so weak and powerless? You are simply a waste. Ah! I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. The Tianlong people shouted in pain. Kill me. Luo's face was stunned, then he reacted, and he growled, I'll kill you now. Choke. The sword at his waist was suddenly pulled out, and a cold light flashed on Tianlongren's face, causing a trace of panic in the latter's eyes. Corazon's face changed, his right hand quickly pressed on Luo's sword, and he spoke solemnly. Luo, calm down. Don't forget your mission. Luo moved for a while, took a deep breath, and his heavy breathing began to calm down. He remembered that he still had a task, and suddenly smashed his right hand on the head of the Tianlongren, knocking the latter out heavily, and then calmly said, Hila Song, you're right, I still have a mission. The two fell into silence. Corazon lit a cigarette and took a deep breath. After 3 minutes, they left here. Yang Qing, who followed Rayleigh out of the bar, just walked out of the 100 meters, when the phone bug in his arms rang. His complexion changed slightly, and then returned to normal. Dylan's was also stunned and walked over quickly. "Hello." Yangqing took out the phone bug and said calmly. "Team Luo K, the mission is complete." Luo Bing's cold words came from it. "Understood. Wait for my order." Yangqing's eyes flashed, and then she said softly, "You seem to be in a bad mood. What happened?" "I have come into contact with the truth of the world." Luo's heavy words came from the phone bug. Then, with a bang, the phone worm hung up, and Yangqing was slightly taken aback. "Is it Luo?" Dylan's asked in a low voice. "It's him." Yangqing nodded and said thoughtfully, "He seems to have seen something that shouldn't be seen." Dylan's narrowed his eyes slightly, nodded and said, "I can understand. After all, his mission is very sensitive." "Yo, two boys, you are so slow, are you eating snails?" Rayleigh's voice came from a distance from the front, causing the two to look at each other and smiled helplessly, then they quickened their pace and moved towards chased after the former. After an hour. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The three came to an uninhabited hill in the Chambord archipelago. If you want to learn to be domineering, you must first understand, what is domineering. Rayleigh turned his back to the two of them, without any nonsense, and started the lesson. Yangqing and Dylan's looked at each other, then stared at Rayleigh seriously. As we all know, there are three types of domineering. They are armed arrogance, knowledgeable arrogance, and overlord arrogance. Rayleigh introduced them one by one. Yangqing and Dylan's nodded, they all knew this. We all know about the overlord color and the knowledgeable color. Please also ask the seniors to tell us how to cultivate the domineering power of the armed color. Yangqing said with a smile. Oh, Rayleigh's eyebrows were the same. He turned around suddenly, trembling all over, and a domineering and aggressive bombardment came over. Overlord. Dylan's eyes widened, shocked. This seemingly ordinary old man has the domineering look of an overlord. Yangqing took a step forward, and there was also a terrifying momentum from the depths of his body, fighting against it with a domineering look. Oh, not bad. Rayleigh's eyes flashed, his body leaned forward, and disappeared in place. Yangqing's eyes narrowed slightly, his head was slightly dodged to the left, the wind swept past, and Rayleigh's fist swept past. Have you also mastered the sight, hearing and color? Rayleigh's eyes were a little surprised. Chapter 122 Low-Key. Yes, I've mastered all the colors of seeing and hearing, and the colors of overlords. Only the colors of armed forces are left. Yangqing said with a smile. Rayleigh nodded thoughtfully and understood. It seems that you only need to master the domineering of the armed color, and you can improve your strength to a stage. Then he turned his head to look at Dylan's and said, So, what about you? I only mastered the domineering and domineering. Dylan said with a smile. Riley smiled, and then said, If that's the case, then I'll stop talking nonsense. 3 colors of domineering. In addition to the knowledge color and the overlord color, there is also the armed color. The armed color is a reaction from the outside to the inside of the body. It can be awakened after the body reaches a limit through years of exercise. His role is to it can improve the personal defense and attack power, like invisible armor. In addition, it can also capture the entity of the capable person, but it cannot make the opponent incapacitate. It is a means to deal with the natural system. Quote. Next, I will show you the specific cultivation methods of the armed color. As for how much you can control, it depends on your respective talents. Of course, I will not give you too much time. Yangqing and Dylan's nodded and listened to Rayleigh's words. Afterwards, Rayleigh stretched out his fist, and his fist was gradually covered with a layer of black mist. This process was very slow. Rayleigh deliberately set the speed of condensation so that the two could clearly see perception, and explained the methods and attention to details for the two. Yangqing and Dylan's listened carefully. During this process, Rayleigh covered his entire arm, or attached his weapon to his weapon, to complete various actions, and he demonstrated the training process for the two of them. For 5 full hours, Rayleigh was teaching the two of them to practice armed arrogance. He could see that the physical fitness of the two of them had actually reached the standard. Color domineering probably mastered. This is different from Luffy in the original work. It took Luffy a long time to master the domineering look of the armed color. That is because his physical quality is far less than that of Yongqing and Dylan's at this time. That's right, I've basically mastered it all. Seeing the black aura lingering on the fists of the two, Rayleigh had a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. Next, you need to improve the quality and quantity of armed colors through continuous practice. Quote. Yongqing nodded, realizing this inexplicable black aura. I sighed in my heart, armed color domineering is indeed a mysterious power. When this layer of black aura covers his fist, he can clearly feel that his defense and attack power have been significantly increased, and he also feels that he seems to be able to grasp the entity of the element. Dylan's is also interesting to disperse the armed colors and gather them together, and he has a lot of fun. Then, this old man's mission has also been completed, and you should leave. The domineering armament that you initially controlled is not very useful for the battle. You still need to practice for a long time, Rayleigh said with a smile. Yongqing nodded and responded with a smile, thank you, Senior, for helping us a lot. What are you going to do next? Rayleigh asked curiously. Do what you need to do. Yongqing's eyes flashed with a chill, and she said with a slight smile. Riley nodded and didn't ask any further questions. The three walked out of this no man's land and parted ways when they came to the street. Rayleigh drank the wine and waved his hand to leave a back view of the two of them. What a good guy, Dylan sighed looking at Rayleigh's back. Yongqing smiled. Rayleigh's bounty may have reached an incredible level. As the right hand of One Piece, his strength is even more incredible. Such a person cannot be judged by good or bad. The two slowly walked aimlessly ahead, chatting while walking. Luo has completed the first stage of the task, what about the others? Do you want to ask? Dylan's asked. No, the task is completed, they will report to me. Yongqing smiled and said. That group of people, will you report? I have no hope of reporting. Dylan said speechlessly, thinking about Bucky, thinking about Enelu, thinking about Drizzt again. Come on, it's all a group unsaved people. Blue blue blue. At this moment, the phone worm rang, and Yongqing answered with a smile. Boss, the general distribution of the Navy in the Chambord archipelago, I have found out, each of the four corners of the south, and northwest is a strong lieutenant general, and the defense is very tight. It is also 5 times that of the other 4 places. These 5 regions support each other and form an unbreakable barrier to prevent all pirate groups from causing chaos. Quote. Such a terrifying force is the reason why the Chambord Islands have been stable for so many years. No matter where an accident occurs, they can support them at an extremely fast speed. Yongqing listened silently, then asked, Bucky, tell me, who is the general defending in the center? Akainu, Sakazuki. It's that mad dog. Bucky's somewhat frightened voice came over, causing Yongqing's eyes to narrow, and a dangerous light flashed. Afterwards, his eyes flashed, and he said with a smile, I see, you continue to monitor them, and once Luo's side moves, attack immediately. Understood. Boss, let's have a blast. Bucky's excited and worried voice came out clearly from the phone bug. Chambord, Bucky and Glades. Bucky, when did you discover the deployment of the Navy? How come I don't know? This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Road. Glades looked inexplicable, obviously playing all the time. What do you know, there are 5 very fun playgrounds in these 5 places, ha ha ha. Bucky said with a big laugh, but he said with fear, I'm so lucky. I almost missed the boss. Quote. On Yongqing's side, he called Drizzy's phone bug. Drizzt, how's it going? It's very serious. The inspection of the Shanghai City Army is very strict, and there are many troops. There are about 50 to 100 in each place, and their strength is stronger than those in other places. Drizzy's voice was a little bit. Seriously, about every 3 kilometers, there will be a team of sailors. The pirates are also extremely low-key. Yongqing's eyes flashed, and suddenly he looked up at the street ahead. Low-key. Not necessarily. Yang Qing's face became playful, and he looked at the opposite alley. There, a team of pirates, 20 or 30 people, was walking towards here. The tall man at the head had a thick smoke from the cigar in his mouth, and his face was arrogant and cold. Chapter 123 Huh, Drizzy's doubts came out. Continue the investigation and wait for my order. Yang Qing hung up the phone bug and looked at the group of people on the opposite side. Dylan's also had a smile on his face. Looking at the people on the opposite side who were getting closer, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Crocodile. It was Crocodile and his group who walked towards Yang Qing and Dylan's. Crocodile, who suffered defeat in Alabasta, did not give up. He also came to the Chambord Islands at the moment, and met Yang Qing very coincidentally. From a distance, Crocodile saw Yang Qing and the two of them, and immediately walked over with everyone. What are pirates? Don't be afraid, don't panic, and you can do it without showing weakness in the face of anyone. Crocodile is undoubtedly such a pirate. He has considerable confidence in himself. After being defeated by Yang Qing, he will not give up or be afraid. Facing Yang Qing again, he still chooses to shoot. On the whole street, a huge sandstorm suddenly blew up, causing the pedestrians in the whole street to squint their eyes. Yang Qing narrowed his eyes, and a smile appeared on his face. The smile on Dylan's face gradually faded, replaced by a cold one. He looked at Crocodile's group and raised his voice softly, "The enemy." "No doubt yes," Yang Qing said with a smile. "Then I'll do it." Dylan stepped forward. After 3 steps, his expression changed and he stopped. Yang Qing's expression changed at the same time, and he looked to the back, where Doflamingo and his group, wearing a feather coat and sunglasses, were walking over giggling. "Ha ha ha, the head of the god of death, Comrade Vice Captain, I didn't expect such a coincidence." Brother Doflamingo said with a long smile, and then he saw Crocodile, his eyes flashed, and the corners of his mouth grinned. "You are actually a crocodile too. Here, what a coincidence. Just to decide the winner," Crocodile said expressionlessly. Being surrounded, Dylan stopped and said helplessly. The invisible silk thread wrapped around him was cut off by the power of his space. Yang Qing also smiled, and there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. "You'd better get out of the way, I don't have time for you right now." Crocodile and Doflamingo both turned cold, and then they said across Yang Qing and Dylan's, "There are 2 people with the highest worth here, it's better to settle them and then settle our account." "How?" "Exactly," Crocodile nodded. "How? Can you solve it?" Yang Qing raised her eyebrows and asked Dylan softly. "No problem, this time, I'm in full state." Dylan's eyes flashed coldly, and he looked at Brother Doflamingo and his party. He could remember the last account clearly. "Then Crocodile, leave it to me," Yang Qing said casually. After Dylan's nodded, the two walked back to back and walked towards their enemy. "It's so bold, 2 people, facing 2 pirates." Brother Doflamingo laughed, his eyes full of chills. The next moment, the battle started instantly. Dylan's appeared in front of Doflamingo in just an instant, and the terrifying dagger slashed towards the latter's neck with an unbelievably fast speed. At the same time, Doflamingo's group who saw Dylan's appeared also shouted and attacked him. "See!" A soft sound rang out, and Doflamingo broke into a cold sweat and took a step towards the back, dodging Dylan's attack. His tie was cut off, and he fell toward the ground. In front, is the surrounded Dylan's. The latter's expression is indifferent, and his figure is suddenly twisted, and he avoids the attack of a group of people at an incredible angle. "It's really scary, it's become so strong." Doflamingo felt a lot of pressure. "Let's shoot together and kill him." 5-color line. Strange lines appeared out of thin air, heading towards Dylan's. The latter body trembled slightly and turned into nothingness, evading the attack. Then he stabbed the dagger in his hand. The dagger passed through the space and stabbed Doflamingo directly on the shoulder. The extremely fast speed made it impossible for the latter to dodge. This battle happened extremely abruptly and the rhythm was unusually fast. In an instant, Doflamingo was already injured. Dylan's completely ignored the attack of the group of people who surrounded him. Anyone's attack can be clearly predicted and prevented. Doflamingo's hand trembled suddenly, and a long whip-shaped line was drawn fiercely towards Dylan's. The latter looked indifferent, took a step forward, and was already in front of Doflamingo. The whip was dodged and fell on the ground, cutting a deep pit into the ground. Dylan stretched out his right hand and grabbed it towards Doflamingo's neck. "You are too arrogant." Seeing Dylan's doing this, Doflamingo's face changed greatly, and black mist immediately filled his right hand. Armed color. Dylan's eyes narrowed, and a layer of black mist was quietly condensed on his right hand. The next moment, the palms and fists of the two collided fiercely, making a loud noise. "You're actually in control." Brother Doflamingo's eyes flashed and he said in shock. The latter's figure suddenly turned around, and when he supported his hands, the space distorted with a hum sound. "Be careful," Doflamingo shouted, feeling bad. "Space Blade." Dylan spit out these three words coldly, very ordinary names, but the power is extremely terrifying. Puff puff. 3 in a row, Don Quixote's house. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The clan members screamed in pain, and they quickly avoided, but they were still scratched by the invisible space blade. In an instant, there were scratches large and small on their stomachs, backs, and arms, and bones were visible. And the power of the space blade is not over yet, and it fiercely moves towards the end of the street. It was not until the roofs of 10 houses were cut open in succession that they slowly disappeared. Hoo 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 hoo. Looking 10 steps away, Dylan's with a cold face. At this moment Doflamingo's forehead was densely packed with fine sweat. "Rewind, rewind." He roared wildly and loudly, already planning to escape. Compared with the last time, this guy is completely different. The ability is strange, and he has mastered the color of knowledge, the color of armed and the domineering, stronger than him. The other family members had no effect at all in the face of the latter's terrifying ability. When Yongqing faced Crocodile and his group, he was even more relaxed and casual. A faint black breath appeared on his fist, and then said with a smile, "Try my new powers on you, Crocodile." On the opposite side of Crocodile, his eyes narrowed. Chapter 124. Be obedient. The dust was flying all over the sky, and Crocodile's lower body was completely turned into sand, and his upper body was floating in the air. This time, he completely gave up hand-to-hand combat and used his fruit ability. Compared with the last time, his ability has undoubtedly increased greatly. As he progressed step by step, everything in the street quietly shattered and turned into gravel. The gust of wind suddenly picked up, rolling up the sky, and slowly extending forward, like a long snake, spitting out its own core. Crocodile was expressionless, looking at Yongqing who was walking across. His eyes were solemn but without a trace of fear. He is also a very courageous man, which is also the reason why Doflamingo attaches great importance to him after contacting him. At this moment, even if he is confident, he is still able to show his weapon and confront the person on the opposite side. Armed color. Above Yongqing's right hand, the dark mist began to linger. It slowly turned into a thin layer of solidified molecules, flickering with an inexplicable aura. The wind blew suddenly, and at this moment, Crocodile's eyes slammed, and the sand and dust on his lower body scattered all over the sky. The particles of sand and dust made Yongqing's eyes narrow. At this moment, Crocodile's figure flashed quickly and came to Yongqing. The golden hook on his right hand flashed a faint blue light under the sunlight and slashed towards the latter's chest. Yongqing's domineering expression dissipated when he heard this, and his body trembled slightly, dodging the blow at an incredible angle. Immediately afterwards, the armed arrogance above his right fist suddenly surged out, accompanied by a punch that slammed towards Crocodile. Crocodile's eyes widened, and a surprise flashed in his eyes, as if he did not expect Yongqing to counterattack so quickly. This punch, he can only dodge it elementally. However, when Yongqing's fist wrapped in pitch-black aura hit him, Crocodile's complexion instantly changed drastically. What? This punch directly grabbed his entity, completely ignoring his elementalization. Crocodile's reaction was extremely fast. The moment Yang Qing's fist touched his body, his eyes flashed viciously, and he also waved the golden hook of his right hand and slashed towards Yang Qing's head. Oh, Yang Qing was a little surprised. The person in front of him had such a response. The armed arrogance could only touch the body of the natural system, but could not make the opponent incapacitate. This punch hit Crocodile's body at this moment. But the latter can still attack. In desperation, Yang Qing withdrew his fist, and his figure flashed slightly. "You are not bad, you have grown up," Yang Qing exclaimed. Compared with the last time, Crocodile was undoubtedly stronger. "No one will stand still," Crocodile sneered. At this moment, Doflamingo and his party had already retreated under Dylan's attack, and Doflamingo shouted, causing the entire family to flee here. Seeing the scene not far away, a look of shock appeared on Crocodile's face. "It's so fast. He knows better than anyone how much Doflamingo is. Under that person's attack, even a family member will be defeated." Moreover, he also clearly saw that the blood-splattered family members in the crowd were clearly seriously injured. With a flicker of his eyes, Crocodile stepped back instantly, blocking the other crew members of the pirate crew who were about to rush forward. "See you later." Crocodile made a decision without hesitation, then turned and left. Dylan sneered and was about to chase Doflamingo, but was stopped by Yang Qing's wave. "Do business first, they are not important." Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and he said softly. Dylan stopped, coldly watching the two teams leave quickly. The two saw a large number of Marines coming at the end of the street, and then quickly left here. The commotion caused by the three-way war attracted the attention of the Navy. But when they came, all they saw were dusty streets and cluttered houses, and terrified pedestrians. "These abominable pirates," the leading colonel scolded with some headache, but there was nothing he could do. "The pirates who can come to this island are very powerful, and there is no way for ordinary sailors to take them." "When will it start?" In the dark alley, Dylan asked Yang Qing with his head tilted. "At night." Yang Qing's eyes flashed and he looked at the narrow sky. Night was the right time to kill people. "Okay." Dylan's eyes flashed a icy chill. Time passed quickly, the day of Chambord Island passed, and the night came. At about 8:30 in the evening, Luo's phone worm suddenly rang. Luo's eyes narrowed, and the expression of Corazon next to him changed, staring at the phone bug, looking extremely dignified. "Luo, do you really want to pick it up?" Luo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The words of the woman in the daytime still echoed in his ears. The person who was not afraid of death walked a path in front of him. What was he afraid of? Worry about what? "Hey, Captain, I'm Luo." Luo answered the phone bug. "Luo." In the phone bug, Yang Qing's voice was a little deep. After he called, he was silent for a while, and then he said softly, "Let's act. Also, be careful." "Understood, Captain," Luo said simply, then hung up the phone bug. "Did you agree like this?" That's the kidnapping of Tianlong people. At this time, no one knows. Once this task is carried out, the whole world will identify you as the culprit. Corazon's face changed greatly, and he shouted loudly. "Corazon, I trust the captain." Luo was silent for more than 10 breaths before he said earnestly and solemnly. "This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading." Corazon's face froze. He sighed, and got out of the way that blocked Luo. Luo's footsteps were very slow, and each step was quite heavy. He slowly came to Tianlongren's side, and then slapped Tianlongren on the face. With a soft, pop, sound, the voice was very clear. Afterwards, Tianlongren's eyes trembled, and he slowly opened his eyes. First, he was confused, and when he saw Luo, he was full of panic. "Don't yell, or I'll kill you right away," Luo said with a blank face, causing the short and fat Tianlongren to shut up immediately. "Now there is a chance, you can be free," Luo explained gently, "but, I need your cooperation, understand?" The Tianlong person nodded obediently, and hope appeared in his eyes. Once I find something wrong, you will die, so it's best not to make other unnecessary actions. Luo continued, maybe you can call the general, but before that, you definitely won't be able to live for a second longer. Understand? The Tianlong man nodded again, indicating that he understood. Then now, follow the two of us and walk towards the building in front of you, be obedient. Luo pointed to the building road in front of him, and the Tianlong people looked at it and was slightly taken aback. It turned out to be a TV station. Chapter 125 Facing the World. When the chunky Tianlong Ren saw the building in the distance, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. There was a large display screen, and the people around were holding cameras or facing the microphones, very busy workers. And inside that building, there is no doubt that it is even more busy. Why are these people taking me to the TV station? Tianlong people thought, but did not dare to ask, and under the pressure of the two, they quickly walked towards the building. Luo was in front, Tianlong was in the middle, and Corazon was in the back, and the three slowly walked towards the TV station. After about 3 minutes, the three came to the TV station. The arrival of the three immediately made the staff here puzzled, and then they frowned. What do you do? Get out of here, we're working. The appearance of Tianlongren's blue nose and swollen face made the people present very curious, and the gloomy expressions of Luo and Corazon also obviously made the people here feel a little weird. Opening the person in front of him, Luo strode into the building, and the staff inside were broadcasting live broadcasts around the world. In front of a phone bug, quietly placed there. Without any hesitation, Luo took the Tianlong Ren and walked in, and then drove away the host who was sitting in the seat. What are you doing? The staff immediately became furious and yelled loudly. But what responded to them was that Luo's right hand and Corazon's mute wall spread out, so that the voice of this old man disappeared and could not be transmitted, so as to avoid causing greater confusion. Afterwards, Luo pressed the Tianlong Ren to the seat in front of him, and slowly opened his mouth to the video with a gloomy expression. Hello everyone, I'm Law, Death Pirates, Surgeon, Trafalgar Law. At the same time, on huge screens around the world, the host of the live broadcast was suddenly thrown away, and then three strange people stepped onto the camera, especially one with a bruised nose and a swollen face, who seemed to be coerced. The other two people, one of them, many people recognized it immediately. Luo. It's Luo from the Death God Pirates. There is a bounty of more than 200 million. He actually appeared on the live TV station. What is he going to do? Everyone looked at the three people on the screen in shock and confusion, unable to understand their purpose. At this moment in the Chambord Islands, after Luo calmly revealed his identity, everyone present trembled, remembering the identity of this terrifying person, a pirate. It turned out to be a pirate. You all need to be calm. An impulse will lead to a tragic end. I don't think you want to be short of arms or legs. Luo's light words made everyone tremble. With a snap of his fingers, a light cover enveloped a radius of 30 meters, enclosing the entire TV station. Now, let's get to the point. Luo looked into the video, and then pressed his right hand on the shoulder of the Tianlong person. The person in front of me is a Tianlong person. Pause, he said again. That's right, it's a Tianlong person. Don't be surprised, he's now in my hands. These two short sentences made the shocked jaws of countless people around the TV screen drop to the ground, their pupils shrank, and they couldn't believe this scene at all. Dragon people. In this world, there are people who dare to kidnap the Tianlong people. Come on, introduce yourself, be good, otherwise, you will know the consequences for yourself. Luo's indifferent words made Tianlongren tremble. Facing the camera, the chunky Tianlong said tremblingly, I'm Durster Saint. I'm a Tianlong. Durst Saint's eyes were full of fear, and the fear in his eyes was clearly seen by people all over the world. At this moment, the high-ranking Tianlong people, so humble and ugly, were seen by people all over the world, causing an uproar. They were horrified, then shocked, their hearts beating faster. Look. Luo Yan smiled and slapped the Tianlongren on the head, causing Durst to scream in horror, revealing his ugliness for the whole world to see. Corazone's eyes narrowed and he drank softly. Luo. Okay, then let's move on to the topic. I'm Law, Trafalgar Law. I kidnapped a draconian. Come on, sea soldiers, come and catch me. There was a contemptuous look on Luo's face. Smile, and then with a pop, the video terminal, Luo's figure disappeared in front of the world. After saying all this, Luo Bing's cold eyes stared at Durst for 3 seconds before withdrawing, and then he said coldly, I hope you can make a difference, otherwise, I can only kill you mercilessly. Durst shuddered and lowered his head, not daring to look at Luo's cold eyes. And at this moment, the whole world really entered the boiling. Almost every lane, town, and village are talking about this earth-shattering thing. A dragon man named Durster Saint was kidnapped by Trafalgar Law, and the ugliness of the dragon man that day was seen by countless people. This terrible fact shocked the whole world. At this moment, Luo's name was known to everyone. Because of this, he has a nickname, Doctor of Death. Luo, who even dared to kidnap the Tianlong people, is regarded as the most daring murderer in the contemporary era. Inside the TV station, Corazon pulled Luo and Durster Saint out of here quickly. Soon, their figures disappeared from everyone's eyes. At the same time, Yang Qing's voice rang in the ears of each team on the Death God. The first group has started to act. Plan, start. On the top of the big tree, Anilu, who was half asleep on the branch, opened his eyes, and a cold smile flashed in his eyes. Then, with a crackling sound, he disappeared in place and moved towards the shampoo group. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Above the island, the palace called the Holy Land left. Are you ready, Glades? I have seen the Marines. Bucky asked Glades beside him nervously in the naval base. No problem, Bucky, I'm ready. This shot will definitely blow up half of their base. Glades nodded seriously. Okay, let's get a big vote. Ha ha ha, so nervous. Bucky trembled, his face very nervous. Chapter 126 All in place. Drizzt here, Robin, Mariah, the three of them have already left the amusement park, and now they are scattered all over the place. The cards in Drizzy's hand are placed on the ground one by one. The pattern is very messy, and his eyes are a little bit dignified. Staring at these cards, there are fine beads of sweat oozing out of his face. What happened at this moment was very important to him. There are 53 places in total, and the large troop of Marines is gathering. The number is quite large. Luo, it is very dangerous. Drizzy's sweat was dripping on the ground, and his eyes were tightly closed. Distributing knowledge and color on these cards. Each card represents a naval unit, and through the mysterious power of the card fruit, he can completely control the details of these units. Including his own troops, he can clearly control it. It is he who is in charge of the deployment of this operation. Captain, Dillons, you two, you can start moving. The Marines are moving in Luo's direction, and the Holy Land has fallen into a restless atmosphere. Drizzt closed his eyes and said to the phone bug. Understood. Yang Qing's voice came out quickly from the phone bug. At Yang Qing, he and Dillons looked at each other, and a cold light flashed in their eyes. Come on, let's get started. Dillons quickly wrapped Yang Qing in the faint space, and then the two disappeared here in an instant, heading towards the Holy Land quickly. Bucky, Glades, head 3,000 meters to the southeast, dodging the large number of Marines 1,000 meters in front of you. Received. Bucky and Glades were startled, and hurried to the place Drizzt said. R.O., Corazon, enter the house in front of you. Understood. Luo's voice came out quickly. Then Luo did not hesitate at all, and pulled Corazon into the house in front of him. Just 3 seconds after they entered, the brigade of Marines ran past this place. After a full 10 seconds, a large number of Marines evacuated here, and Kelisong let out a long sigh, his eyes very nervous. What is Drizzy's ability? He actually knows our situation. Corazon asked in shock. Card fruit, this guy has always been unfathomable. Luo said casually, then walked out of the room, wandering around, avoiding the pursuit of the Marines. Anilu, stop your actions, There are the captain and the deputy captain to deal with it. You go to Luo and be responsible for protecting them. Drizzy's serious voice rang in Enel's ears, and Enel's body that turned into thunder and lightning suddenly stopped and appeared in midair. Then he made a cut, with an unwilling face, turned his head and flew in the direction of Luo. Just 5 seconds later, a string of lightning appeared 5 meters in front of Luo and Corazon, and Analu's figure slowly emerged. Analu, Luo exclaimed in surprise. Yeah, let's go. Analu nodded coldly, then turned around and walked forward. Luo and Corazon looked at each other, and their faces became more relaxed. They didn't expect that it would be Annie who came over. This time, their safety has been greatly guaranteed. In the eyes of these two people, there is no doubt that Analu is absolutely powerful, even comparable to Dylan's and the captain. Your friends seem to be all-powerful, Corazon whispered to Luo. Don't worry, Corazon, I am very confident, Luo said with a smile. Robin, Mariah, you go and turn with Bucky, 500 meters to your left, Drizzt said to one of the cards. Robin and Moria looked at each other, then nodded. Soon, the confluence was completed among them. After carefully comparing all the information in his mind, Drizzt let out a long sigh. This time there was nothing wrong, and there would never be a problem. Next, he opened his eyes, placed the 3 cards in his hand on the ground one by one, and turned them over. Your Majesty. Little King. I hope these 3 cards can decide the outcome of this battle. Drizzt sighed with a long sigh, his eyes flickering fiercely. This time, he has to go all out, otherwise, if they are not careful, they will be annihilated. Holy Land, at Mary Joa. At this moment, the paradise of the Tianlong people has turned upside down. Countless Tianlong people were furious, and the content of the live broadcast on the video was also clearly perceived by them. It made them feel ashamed, and at a loss. The whole world saw that the Tianlong people were so fragile, despicable, and humiliating. Whose is that? Durst was caught by pirates. Shame, shame. Who the hell is that guy? He dares to kidnap the Tianlong people. He is so bold, unforgivable. Warring States slapped the table in front of him fiercely. His face changed drastically, anger and surprise alternated. It's them. It's them again. Kidden the Tianlong people. Thanks to their ability, what are these people going to do? After he roared angrily twice, he quickly said to Aokiji, quickly go to the Chambord Islands, cooperate with Akainu to arrest those people, and do whatever it takes. This time, there must be no more mistakes, otherwise, the losses suffered by the Marines will be devastating. Aokiji patted his head, then stood up, left the office, and headed towards the Chambord Islands. He felt a bit of a headache, remembering that he had fought with that group of people a few years ago, and he didn't know what he had grown up to at this time. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The situation, that group of people, is not so easy to arrest. Thinking about it, the senior general of the Yellow Monkey was beaten like that. At this time, he was still lying in the hospital, and Qingzi had a stomachache. In the Holy Land. In Monet's palace, the expression on the face of this always gloomy Tianlong person at this moment is even more dripping. That boy from the Lucifer family. He has grown to this point. He held a thin bounty in his hand, and his pupils were full of shock and a hint of deep fear. At the moment, they are on the Chambord Islands. Monet's heart beat faster. Faintly, he felt that the target of the group was him, and a panic hit his heart. For a while, he was a little bewildered. Chapter 127 imminent. Monet suddenly didn't know if what he did was right or not. From his own point of view, of course he couldn't let go of the culprit who killed his son. You must use all your strength to destroy everything the opponent has. But seeing that the other party has grown to what it is today, his own strength and power made Monet himself terrified. All he has is the identity of a Tianlong person, but he has no strength at all. He has never cultivated. Years of pampering life have made his belly a little fat, and it is difficult for him to straighten his waist again. Compared with ordinary hard-working ordinary people's strength, he is not as good as. He only has energy, but the energy power he possesses is not even a fart in the eyes of his enemies. Dylan's, Ghost Dylan's, another big pirate with a bounty of more than 400 million. El Nilu, it's still more than 400 million. Monet's right hand trembled and trembled slightly, looking at the pile of bounties in front of him, which made him very frightened. He felt as if there was an invisible palm tying his neck, making it difficult for him to even breathe and a little suffocated. Sitting alone in the empty palace for a long time, Monet stood up with all his strength and walked towards the door. This is the holy land of the Tianlong people, and there are a large number of Tianlong people. They all walked out of the door at the moment, talking to each other about the big event that just happened. With angry and worried expressions, this time it was Durst, so will it be their turn next time? Monet walked out of the door, and what he saw was a dense crowd of figures on the street. Every family of Tianlong people was tightly protected by a man in a black suit, with a solemn and nervous expression. What happened just now? No one can easily deal with it. Who knows, this kind of crazy and daring people will appear again. The Alpha family is also standing here. Alpha, if the old man is right, the person who kidnapped Durst seems to be your son's subordinate. An old man leaned on a cane and asked Alpha with a cold face. Alpha's face changed, and he protected Jason, his wife, behind him, and then said solemnly, "He has been expelled from the Tianlong family, not my son." Humph. After hearing this, the old man snorted coldly, and lost his voice. At this time, a middle-aged man came over with a very excited expression. "Alpha, if my son of Coles makes a mistake, I will not let you go." It's Coles, the father of the kidnapped Drake Durster. The shame of the family. Tisk tisk tisk, it's really ugly, and it has lost all the face of our Tianlong people. The family should be kicked out, it's a shame. Facing the indifference and jokes of the Tianlong people, Cole's expression changed, and he clenched his fist tightly, then he gave Alpha a fierce look, and quickly left here. Oh, it's troublesome again. Alpha shook his head, and out of the corner of his eyes, he saw Monet. At this moment, Monet was unexpectedly silent. When he saw Alpha looking at him, his eyes flashed, and then his figure flashed slightly. He left here and disappeared in a blink of an eye. A Monet had already made him devastated, and another Coles came out. "Father, don't worry, they don't have much ability. Jace has grown into a young man at this moment. He is very mature at a young age," comforting his father. In his eyes, only his elder brother is the real powerhouse. As for these people, there was a sneer on Jace's face, and I'm afraid he didn't even have the courage to face his elder brother. Chambord Islands. Akainu sat in the center of the station, his face heavy and angry, and the people next to him looked at his face, trembling with fear. "I haven't found it yet." His face showed 3 words with anticipation: impatient. His right foot stomped quickly on the floor, indicating his inner restlessness. During the time he was stationed in the Chambord archipelago, such a major thing would happen, which really made him helpless and angry. "I found it." Just as he finished speaking, the sailor next to him shouted loudly, and then he pointed to the back of a tree on the screen, where the figures of Luo and Corazon clearly appeared. "On the 8th district, behind this radish-headed tree, they are hiding here." Quote. Akainu stood up immediately, his eyes full of gloom. The 8th district. These scumbags of the world should let them know what absolute justice is. Then, the entire center garrison was dispatched. Akainu walked at the forefront, and quickly rushed towards the 8th district. During this time, Luo's every move was watched by Akainu and the others, unable to escape. In an unnamed corner, Drizzy's sweaty face suddenly changed, and he shouted to Bucky, "Bucky, 3,000 meters to the west of you." Akainu took the central garrison and walked towards Luo. "Speed, block their way, and destroy this group of garrison troops for me." Bucky's expression changed abruptly after hearing Drizzy's order with excitement. Hey, are you kidding me? That's 3,000 garrison troops, and generals. Stop talking nonsense, act quickly. Drizzt shouted loudly, If you don't act, Luo and the others will be in danger. At the same time, on Luo's side, Nilu's eyes flashed a cold light, looking behind them. What's the matter, Anilu? Luo asked immediately. Someone is chasing after him. Anilu saw and heard that Akainu and others, especially Akainu himself, made his eyes twinkle, and the pressure increased greatly. Soon, the three of Luo saw that a large number of Marines headed by Akainu had appeared 2 kilometers away on the opposite side, and their faces changed. It's Admiral, Akainu, saw. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Kasky. Corazone's face was trembling constantly, and his words were knotted. You go first, I'll stop them. Anilu crossed Luo and Corazon a few steps, and then said coldly with a sinister smile on his face. Luo and Corazon looked at each other, then turned and left without hesitation. Follow me, these scumbags actually want to escape. Akainu shouted loudly, and the navy behind him ran out quickly, chasing after Luo and Corazon. Hey tilde tilde tilde. At this moment, a loud shout made the whole scene quiet, and they looked to the left at the same time. After seeing the source of the sound, Luo and Corazon's expressions changed slightly, and Anilu's eyes even showed a hint of surprise. Bucky. The person who came was Bucky. At this moment, he was standing in the open space less than 300 meters away from the large number of Marines. He looked at the Marines nervously, especially when he saw Sakazuki staring at him with cold eyes. When he couldn't help but tremble. Bucky, get over your fear, how come you've been like this for so long? Chapter 128 _. In the back, Glades stepped forward, gave Bucky a slap, then looked at the other's navy with a solemn expression, and said lightly, come on, shoot them, take them to the sky, and stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun. Quote. Okay. Bucky clenched his fists, and then nervously showed an ugly smile to Sakazuki and the others. Hey, sorry, sailors, you Bucky uncle, you are going to go crazy. Sakazuki's face sank, and the high-temperature breath from his body made the air sultry, and the seamen behind him couldn't help but take a few steps back. 2 seconds later, Bucky's hands were on the ground, and Glades stretched out his hands and began to compress the air. Glades, come on, I'm ready. Bucky shouted loudly. Okay, you come first. Glades also said loudly. Not far away, Luo, Corazon, Anilu, and Sakazuki and others looked at these two people, and there was a trace of doubt in their eyes. What are these two going to do? But after just 3 seconds, the expressions of the people at the scene changed drastically. There was a hint of surprise in Anilu's eyes. Corazon's mouth and jaw opened wide, and were about to fall to the ground, and Luo's eyes showed a touch of shock. On the other hand, the sea soldiers had a terrified face. Break apart, explode, Bucky roared, the sweat dripping from his forehead fell to the ground and broke into several pieces. Then, the ground for 1,000 meters in front of him was shocked, and all the seamen standing on it suddenly felt as if their hearts were pinched. Buzz. The earth shook again, and Sakazuki felt the ground under his feet soften, and shouted loudly while his face changed, get out of here. Boom. A deep pit with a radius of 500 meters suddenly appeared in the field, and the earth seemed to be shattered suddenly, turning into fine dust all over the sky, obscuring the sight of all the sailors. 3,000 sailors, a full 2,000, fell into this pit in an instant. Glades. Bucky shouted after a blow. It's my turn, Glades exclaimed. Then his 2 arms began to shake at an irregular frequency. After more than 20 times of shaking, a huge transparent sphere with a diameter of 2 meters appeared in front of him, shaking slightly, exuding a frightening the breath seemed to explode at any moment. Huge, air cannon, sortie. Glades shouted and pushed the sphere forward sharply. Huh. The huge sphere pierced the sky and rose into the sky. Almost in an instant, it entered the deep pit and blasted the seamen who fell into the deep pit. One of the generals, Akainu, was naturally among them. When he looked up suddenly, he saw a huge sphere slammed into the center of everyone, and his pupils shrank suddenly. Boom. A huge explosion sounded, and the fire was everywhere, and the 1,000 sailors standing on the edge of the deep pit were overturned in an instant. In the deep pit, countless sea soldiers were seriously injured and were directly blasted out of the pit, and then fell heavily on the ground, trembling twice, and lost their breath. Opposite the sea soldiers, Luo and Corazon looked at this scene in surprise and couldn't believe it. Come on, just kidding, these two. Especially Corazon, he just got on the ship, he didn't understand the strength of everyone, and he didn't even understand everyone's bounty. Seeing that these two people, together, killed so many sailors in an instant, was a little shocked and unbelievable. Nice job. In the distance, Bucky and Glades were excited and clapped each other's palms. The two palms clapped together heavily, making a loud sound. You guys, I'll be damned. In the deep pit, a hot flame suddenly rose into the sky, and the temperature here instantly increased. Everyone looked up in shock and saw a huge meteorite. It's Sakaski. Bucky and Glades turned blue with fright, and quickly ran to both sides to avoid the falling meteorite. Boom! The meteorite slammed behind the two, and a huge air wave lifted the two of them 3 times before they stopped. This guy, the volcano erupted. Glades looked at this scene in shock. In the deep pit, Akainu walked out step by step, half of his body was burning with hot flames, and the whole body, showing a liquid flame breath that burned the entire ground into magma. Analu's eyes narrowed, he turned his long stick, aimed at Akainu in the distance, and then said solemnly, Luo, Corazon, you all get out of here. Without the slightest hesitation, Luo and Corazon nodded and ran quickly into the distance. After Akainu walked out of the deep pit, the primary target was not the most powerful Analu, but Bucky and Glades lying on the ground in the distance. These two people, only these two people, he will never let go. Call. As if a gust of wind blew, Sakaski's figure suddenly disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was already in front of Bucky, and then he coldly stretched out his right hand. PFF'd, the right fist high-temperature magma was burning up, and Bucky's hair was on fire, and the latter's face instantly became terrified. Go to hell! Sakaski slammed down fiercely. Bucky! Glades' shouts spread throughout the arena, causing Luo and Corazon, who turned to escape, to stop immediately, turn their heads sharply, and then they saw that where Bucky was originally they were surrounded by a fierce flame, and in an instant, their whole bodies were shocked, and their eyes shrank violently. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Hey, fake. Corazon said, trembling, unable to believe that Bucky died like this. Analu's eyes narrowed, his face became extremely cold, his body flashed, turned into lightning, and appeared behind Akainu. The long stick swept away, and attacked with lightning. Akainu turned into magma, easily dodging Analu's attack, and then he looked in front of him. His eyes narrowed slightly. It's not dead. Scared me to death. After a full 5 seconds, Bucky's voice came from the sky. Everyone looked up and saw that Bucky's upper body was actually in the sky. At this moment, Bucky made a terrified expression, and his head was full of fear. It was cold sweat, his feet, his legs, his feet, were in front of Sakaski. It turned out that when Sakaski delivered the blow, Bucky conditioned his body to be torn apart, and because of this, he successfully escaped the blow. The next blow will kill you. Sakaski's body trembled and disappeared again, and then the next second, he appeared in the air, and flames burned again above Bucky's head and fist. Death! Bucky yelled in horror. Chapter 129 The Three Corners. Above the ground, Analu's eyes became gloomy, and he took a step and disappeared into lightning. Bang! Zila! A short voice came out, and Analu's long stick blocked Akainu's fist, protecting Bucky behind him, and said with a cold expression. Mad dog, don't be too arrogant, I'm for, Analu. Akainu's eyes immediately narrowed into a dangerous gap. Bucky, who was on the side, immediately fell towards the ground with a terrified expression on his face. His upper body and lower body were combined, and then he threw his feet away and started running. Glades ran towards Bucky quickly, and 3 seconds later, the two converged, gasping for breath. Scared me to death. Bucky was almost speechless, and his whole body was a little weak. Facing the general's fear, his entire body trembled. Glades was better, but looking at the sky, Sakazuki, who was constantly fighting with Anilu, also had the same look of fear. General, it's really terrifying. That power makes countless people unable to even raise the psychology of resistance. Boom. Above the sky, Sakazuki and Anilu clashed with thunder and fire, and the aftermath continued to fall to the ground, causing a large area of scorched earth. Their aggression is terrifying, and once they land on a building, it will collapse the house, split the tree in half, and set off a raging fire. Akainu's brows furrowed. The guy on the opposite side is indeed not his opponent, but the domineering and thundering fruit, but it should not be underestimated. For a while, it is impossible for him to win Anilu. Out of the corner of his eye, he swept to Bucky and Glades below, and Sakazuki's eyes flashed. Clean up these two guys first, in the name of absolute justice. At this moment, Sakazuki doesn't care about being mean or not. His figure flashed, and suddenly disappeared from Anilu's eyes. The latter's eyes widened, his face changed slightly, and he shouted towards the two people below, "You two, be careful, run." Bucky and Glades were stunned and looked around, but there was no one there, but the next moment, their bodies suddenly froze, and a huge shadow shrouded them both behind them. Sweat was pouring out. A dull voice sounded from behind them. "Big Spitfire." Anilu's eyes suddenly widened in the sky, and he cursed, "Damn." Then, he turned into lightning and rushed down, but it was too late. The scorching flames had already spewed out and rolled behind the two of them. At this moment, Glades turned around abruptly, his face covered with fine beads of sweat, then he raised his hands and slammed towards the large mass of magma in front of him. "Air, expel." "Call." Sakazuki's face changed. The air in the space around him was forcibly pulled away, and the flaming magma suddenly, poofed, the flame dimmed, and finally went out. A layer of ash hit Glades and Bucky directly. At this moment, Bucky also turned around and ate a mouthful of dust. Ba ba ba. Bucky vomited several times, and then saw Sakazuki who was in front of him, and immediately changed color. Without hesitation, he raised his palm and directly printed it on Sakazuki's mouth. Fractured. Sakazuki was still in the midst of the shock of his own rock fruit being invalidated at the moment. Seeing Bucky's hand touching him, he didn't react. Then, he saw his body turned into a torn-apart magma, fell towards the rear, and his pupils immediately shrank. These two guys, especially him. Sakazuki looked at Gleister, shocked. Crackling. Anilu appeared above the mass of magma, flicked his long stick, took his wrist as the axis, and after turning a circle, suddenly swept the mass of magma 10 meters away. Lightning and flames intertwined, and bright flowers flashed. Then, Sakazuki's figure slowly appeared 10 meters away, looking solemnly at the three people in the distance. Glades. Anilu glanced at Glades at the back, but he didn't expect this simple-hearted guy to completely restrain Sakazuki on the opposite side. The dignified general-level combat power is actually restrained. How should the flame burn in a place without air? This question may be difficult to answer. Therefore, Sakazuki's heart is also heavy at this moment. Chi-chi-chi. The magma burned again, and Sakazuki's eyes flashed as he slowly walked forward. These three people are too much of a threat. Together, the three of them were able to pose a threat to themselves. The next moment, Sakazuki appeared in the center of the three. "You are too dangerous, in the name of absolute justice, destroy you." The heavy words resounded in the ears of the three, and the expressions of the three changed. "Take care of yourself first, mad dog." Anilu sneered, and the long stick flashed lightning and stabbed at the former. Glades used his ability, the air around Akainu completely dissipated, the magma went out directly, and the elemental body returned to its original state. Bucky's hand moved towards the rear, and a strange splitting force attacked Sakazuki directly. Sakazuki stood in the middle, surrounded by enemies on all sides. His face was icy cold, his right fist was covered with dark-armed domineering, and his left fist was stretched out, also armed with domineering, and then, a hand greeted Anilu's domineering. Thunderbolt, the other hand, punched Bucky directly. Bang! The huge force directly pushed Anilu back, and Bucky rolled twice and fell to the ground. Afterwards, Sakazuki kicked. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Glades kicked it out, kicked the ladder's ability to the mid-end, kicked it 10 meters away, and hit a big tree heavily. Immediately afterwards, he disappeared in place and came to the top of Bucky's head. Big Spitfire. Damn it, it's me again, am I easy to bully? Bucky was anxious, he rolled and squatted on the ground, and then without hesitation, he activated his ability towards the magma that came directly towards him. Fractured. Under this strange ability, the magma was directly divided into countless tiny particles, which were divided towards both sides. Sakazuki's punch was completely ineffective, which made him startled again. It is to find that he has been surrounded. Looking at the three, Sakazuki's face calmed down. These three guys are really difficult to deal with. This, even he had to admit. If there were only two of the three, it would undoubtedly not be able to slow down his progress, but the three of them, one corner, even maintained a balance with him, making it difficult for him to act rashly. And these three people, their respective strengths, also have their own characteristics. Anilu's lightning, Glades completely restrained him. Bucky's fruit can actually dissipate the magma. Chapter 130. You are too far behind. With 3 people and 3 horns, Anilu resisted the powerful attack power of his natural system. Although Bucky and Glades were not very strong, his general attacks were enough to deal with them. In this state, he fell into a passive state as if his 4 hands and feet were tied. In the field, Sakazuki stood at the very center, and the 3 of Anilu had a corner, watching Sakazuki closely. The eyes of the 4 people are very solemn, and they quietly see the oppressive atmosphere shrouded here. The remaining Navy soldiers around did not dare to enter the battlefield of 4 people. The terrifying momentum shocked everyone in the field. Really, it surprised me. Sakazuki's gloomy voice came out, and suddenly, his figure disappeared again, and at the moment when he disappeared, Anilu's eyes flashed, and lightning flashed, but also disappeared. The next moment, in front of Glades, the figures of Sakazuki and Anilu appeared. The lightning and magma wanted to touch, and the bursting element immediately exploded around the 2 of them, burning flames. Glades was sweating profusely, and without hesitation, he launched his attack forward. Air Cannon. At the same time, Bucky's right hand slammed on the ground, fractured. Bang! Sakazuki's head was directly burst into flames, and a small pit appeared in the ground under his feet. The balance of the whole body was lost, and he fell to the side. An icy light flashed in Anilu's eyes, and with a flick of the long stick, it swept across the former's waist directly. Poof! The thunder and lightning collided with the magma again, and sparks burst out from the sky. Sakazuki's right fist was filled with a dark and domineering look of armed color. While falling, he turned his power at an incredible angle and punched Anilu with a punch. Let the latter's face change and raise a stick to compete. Bang! Anilu was actually hit by this punch and flew dozens of meters. He slammed into the tree behind him heavily, directly hitting a big pit with herringbone characters, and a wisp of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. Anilu's eyes became more gloomy, and his killing intent was soaring. With a sudden flash of his body, he had disappeared in place, and appeared in front of Sakazuki again. On the long stick, scorching thunder and lightning flashed. Glades and Bucky had also arrived not far from Sakazuki. The 2 almost looked at each other, and then activated their abilities at the same time. Vacuum area. Crack! The burning magma on Sakazuki's body instantly extinguished, and then his figure flashed slightly with extremely small movements. He avoided the attack from Bucky, and the building behind instantly burst into dust. At this moment, Anilu's long stick had reached the top of his head. Oh! Sakazuki's eyes flashed. The next moment, with the sound of boom, Sakazuki was hit 20 meters by Anilu, and he rolled over on the ground and then stopped. 3 seconds later, Sakazuki stood up slowly, his expression gloomy and terrifying, full of endless anger. Countless sailors watching the battle on the side watched this scene in horror, terrified in their hearts. "General, it was injured. Quick, quick, attack them!" A sailor roared loudly, and in an instant, the remaining sailors on the side launched an attack on the three of Anilu. At the same time, Sakazuki also turned into lava and attacked Anilu again. "This is trouble." Bucky and Glades looked at each other. Then they fought with the Navy soldiers present. There is no doubt that the Navy soldiers brought by Sakazuki are not easy ones, and their strengths are very powerful. For a moment, Bucky and Glades were in a hurry. Anilu was completely targeted by Sakazuki, and that stick left a deep impression on him. On the side of Luo and Corazon, they avoided the search of the Marines all the way, and avoided it carefully and cautiously. In fact, by this time, their mission has been completed, and the rest of the crew is in charge. With Naderster on his back, Corazon was panting. "This dead pig is really too heavy." This was the first time Corazon complained. Luo couldn't remember. The two moved forward in silence. They didn't know the purpose, they only knew how to keep avoiding. However, when they walked around the 5 streets and walked at the mouth of a dark alley, their footsteps stopped and their eyes shrank instantly. Hey, this is fake." Corazon looked at the group of people in shock and said incredulously. Luo Yi's eyes flashed, his heart trembled, and he was very surprised. Ha 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 ha, no doubt, Corazon, my dear brother, everything you see is true." The Doflamingo family slowly emerged from the street and stood in front of the two of them. There are a large number of these people, more than a dozen. At this moment, they stare at them indifferently, making both of them tense. Even if they were killed, they would never have imagined that they would meet Doflamingo and his party here. "Why are you here?" Luo asked coldly. "You made such a big noise, who wouldn't pay attention to your whereabouts?" "I just had better luck and followed you." Brother Doflight smiled gloomily, flashing under the dark sunglasses. After a cruel light, he walked towards the two of Luo step by step. "This is a big deal." Sweat appeared on Corazon's forehead. "How's it going? Come back. The family needs you, Luo, Corazon, and I need you too." Brother Doflamming smiled. No one could see what his eyes looked like under the sunglasses. "As long as you come back, everything in the past can be forgotten." Quote. Luo was silent, but Corazon was a little surprised. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Grid, how could it be possible to let go of all the past mistakes of the two of them? In the blink of an eye, he understood when he thought about it. What Doflamingo needs is the fame of the two to elevate their status. There is no doubt that the reputation of kidnapping Tianlong people shocked the world. If Luo can really join Doflamingo's pirate group, their fame can instantly jump to the top position in the world. There is no doubt that the help of Doflamingo is better than killing Luo. Even bigger. As a scheming bitch, Doflamingo would naturally not give up such an opportunity. "I refuse." Without any hesitation, Luo said directly. He raised his head and mocked Brother Doflamingo with contempt. "Dover, you are too far behind. Compared with the captain, the qualifications are too far behind to compare with the captain." Quote. "You who hide in the shadows are like a despicable, sinister, greedy, shameless clown. You are too far away." On the opposite side, the smile on Brother Doflamingo's face suddenly stagnated, and an icy chill flashed in his eyes. Chapter 131 The Holy Land is trembling. Killing intent burst out from Doflamingo's eyes. He didn't want to say a word, he just waved his hand. The members of the Don Quixote family behind him all started to move towards Luo and Cora. The two of them attacked. The overwhelming pressure instantly enveloped the two of Luo. This time, it's not easy to do. Corazon was sweating profusely. He was very aware of his brother's cruelty and ruthlessness. This man's nature is evil. People. In an area of the Chambord archipelago, Drizzt closed his eyes, sweating profusely. "Luo, Corazon," he murmured in a low voice, "this is a big deal." Suddenly, He put his hand on the far left of the 3 cards on the ground and held down the A card. Want to play this card? Drizzt hesitated. 3 seconds later, his eyes opened. It was imminent. Luo and Corazon had already entered a desperate situation. Damn Doflamingo! In an instant, Drizzt didn't hesitate any longer. He frantically roared at the phone bug. Luo, Corazon, run 100 meters behind, hurry. Now, immediately. Drizzt. Luo and Kailasong were stunned, and in a blink of an eye, they turned around and ran towards the back without any hesitation. Brother Doflamingo's group immediately froze when they saw Luo's actions, and then they chased after him. Quick, quick, quick. Drizzt's eyes kept trembling, and his right hand pressed the A card, trembling and shaking. 8 seconds later, Drizzt shouted without hesitation, "Maid, go to hell. I wasted a card." Suddenly, the Ace card was flipped over. Buzz. Run, run. Luo, Corazon, you must run as far as you can. Drizzt's frantic voice sounded from Luo and Corazon's ears, making the 2 of them run frantically without daring to stop. The sound of huge footsteps was very clear in the street, and even the Marines found them and chased after them. But all this, the 2 of them ignored it and ran wildly. Buzz. A layer of strange fluctuations enveloped the kilometer above Luo's original standing position. The air suddenly became dull, and the ground began to tremble. Brother Doflamingo and his group were startled and a little surprised when they looked at the ground. What is it? They looked up, and a huge card first appeared as a phantom, and then quickly became solid. Then, in the shocked eyes of everyone, a gust of wind suddenly blew, accompanied by lightning flashes, and quickly stamped down towards the ground. Boom! A scorching flame erupted, covering a radius of 1,000 meters. Brother Doflamingo and his group were all shrouded in it. Even the Marines who had just discovered Luo and Corazon were also involved in this disaster. A series of explosions, like flash floods, swept the area. To be able to destroy everything here, Luo and Corazon were rushed out of 100 meters by this flame, and they rolled on the ground for dozens of meters before they stopped. This is Drizzt, what did you do? Luo said in shock. He was covered in scars, but he was still very horrified. It's terrifying, Doflamingo and the others, it's over. Corazon's eyes widened and he stared at this place incredulously. Run. The 2 stood up and ran away. The area swept by the explosion was too large, and the flames that erupted were clearly visible to people from a few kilometers away, and almost all buildings and trees within a kilometer radius were shrouded in it. When the flames receded, what appeared was a piece of charred black, and a huge ground that had sunk by a full meter. Hoo-hoo! Brother Doflamingo gasped heavily, and removed the white silk thread that shrouded his family. The sunglasses on his eyes had long since shattered, his whole body was tattered and burnt. There was a biting chill in his eyes, and the anger caused his mouth to rise and fall. This huge explosion made his anger burn completely. The Death God Pirates Gang. The entire Doflamingo pirates were almost wiped out by a single card from Drizzt, completely losing their fighting power. They looked at the sea soldiers who came quickly in the distance, then supported each other and staggered away from here. Drizzt. Bean-sized sweat dripped from his forehead, and Drizzt was also panting heavily. This blow took a lot of his energy. However, the destructive power caused is also extremely terrifying. Wasting one of my cards, it's abominable. Drizzt scolded fiercely, and then he focused his attention on the Holy Land. Captain and Dillons, have you arrived yet? His eyes narrowed slightly, and Drizzt saw that Yongqing and Dillons had already stood outside the walls of the Tianlongren Palace. How? Where to enter? Dillons asked softly, looking at the building complex in front of him. A trace of nostalgia appeared on Yongqing's face, and vaguely, the teenage girl appeared in front of him, his parents, and the little Jess whose nose was constantly bursting. A smile appeared on his face, and he walked towards the door lightly. Enter through the main entrance. I shouldn't be sneaking around. In the Holy Land, the Tianlong people still gather together. The lively discussion they discussed with each other was all about what to do with the brutal guy who kidnapped Delster. Between the words, it seemed as if the abominable murderer had been caught. Face. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Full of confidence and pride. Buzz. Suddenly, there was a slight tremor in the direction of the Holy Land Gate, and a domineering feeling filled the air. This breath made the entire Holy Land tremble, as if surrendered to some terrifying aura. There were slight cracks on the wall. Da, da, da. The sound of light footsteps was clearly heard in the ears of all the Tianlong people present, causing them to cast their eyes in the direction of the gate. Two figures are slowly walking towards here. Their footsteps were very light, but with each step, a large number of men in black suits surrounded by them on both sides, all with inexplicable white eyes, fell softly to the ground. As the two figures approached, a strong and domineering atmosphere began to sweep here, making the surrounding Tianlong people feel dizzy. Buzz. The building complex began to tremble and tremble. The domineering aura made everything seem to have to surrender. The trees, flowers and plants on both sides of the street began to bend over, as if surrendering, kneeling, and surrendering in front of this momentum. The two figures got closer and closer. Crack, crack, crack. The Tianlong people began to fall to the ground one after another. This terrible scene made their pupils shrink, and there was a trace of fear in their hearts. Chapter 132 Humble. The two figures gradually came to the vicinity of 30 meters from the crowd, and a large number of Tianlong people fell to the ground, and the number of people continued to increase. This terrifying breath can make people with weak willpower quickly fall into unconsciousness, shocking everyone's spirits. As they approached, the appearance of the two was clearly seen. At this moment, there are more than a dozen Tianlong people standing in the field. There was panic in the eyes of these Tianlong people, looking at the two people who came, and wanted to shout loudly, but when they looked around, a large number of people in black suits and Tianlong people who fell on the ground didn't know who to call. Hi, where are the sailors? A Tianlong man shouted in fear, and was attacked by two people silently. Don't shout, the Marines are busy dealing with the chaos in the Chambord archipelago at the moment, have you forgotten? That dragon named Delster. Heart sank to the bottom. Yes, a large number of Tianlong people have been mobilized and headed towards the Chambord Islands, and even the generals are here. For a while, this holy land was actually in a vacuum of defense. Are you, the child of the Alpha family? At the forefront, the old man who had been silent for a while, suddenly opened his mouth and said, he was holding a cane in his hand, his eyes were majestic, his eyes were piercing, and he was very imposing. Yes. Yang Qing nodded. Through the crowd, he saw his parents staring at him. His mother's expression was obviously a little excited, while his father maintained his calm and expressionless face, but he was also through his trembling hands, he could see his restless mind. There is also Jace, the former little furry child. Now he has grown to about 1 meter 5, looks very energetic, and looks like himself 7 or 8 points. Seeing himself, his whole body trembled and trembled with excitement, but it could be seen that the child had grown up a lot, and he didn't even shout out. What's your purpose in coming here? The old man slammed his cane toward the ground twice, and then said solemnly, attracting a large number of naval forces toward the Chambord Islands, minimizing the defense of the Holy Land. What do you have to do with such a person? You must know that you have been expelled from the ethnic group long ago, and you are not qualified to stand here. Purpose. Eligibility. Yang Qing smiled. He turned his gaze to the dozen or so remaining people, and then stared at a middle-aged Tianlong man who was obviously a little scared and withdrawn. In the years since I was expelled from the Holy Land, some mice have been biting me tightly. Although to a strong tiger, this mouse is so inconspicuous and fragile, but it has been a long time and many times. Tigers are always annoying, aren't they? Simply, I'll come here directly. I'll take care of it myself. The heads of these mice are gone. Simple, crisp, direct. Tianlongren's eyes narrowed, and his face was very serious. Do you know what you are doing? We are willing to give you a chance if you survived a few years ago, but this opportunity does not mean that you can still mess around. There was a hint of sarcasm on Yang Qing's face. He strode forward and came directly to the Tianlong man he had been staring at from the beginning. Then, looking at him, he took 3 steps back, not even having the courage to look at himself. Even more disdain in his eyes. Are you Monet? It's better to be famous than to meet. Why are you so afraid of me? Lucifer. Alpha stood up and shouted heavily, don't mess around, this is the Holy Land. Father. Yang Qing turned his head and said seriously, I won't mess around, I'll leave here after I've dealt with my own affairs. Then he turned to his mother, and both Jace and Jace smiled. You, don't mess around, kill me and you will die too. Monet said in horror, his body trembling uncontrollably. Looking at Yang Qing's eyes was like looking at a terrifying demon, causing him to curl up involuntarily. Don't worry, I will definitely kill you to understand the grievances between the two of us. Yang Qing smiled contemptuously, a mouse that was secretly looking for trouble for him. When he really faced it, it would be so unbearable, which really disappointed him a little. I thought you would have much courage, but I didn't expect such cowardice. I was wrong. Forgive me. A trace of resentment flashed in Monet's eyes, and he lowered his head deeply. The surrounding Tianlong people, including the old man, watched this scene quietly, watching Yang Qing's arrogant and powerful appearance. They were both fearful and complicated in their hearts. Yang Qing ignored Monet's words again. In his eyes, Monet was already a dead person. He looked around the Tianlong people present, and then said with a chuckle, you can stand under my domineering, it shows that you're the will, the spirit, and the daring, the status is not bad. Quote. As for these people who fell on the ground, they are all rubbish. There's no need to ignore them either. The Tianlong people looked at each other a few times and smiled bitterly. Is this a compliment? Why not be happy at all? Then, let's make a break now. Yang Qing's voice was serious and serious. I don't care if you expel me from the Tianlong people, the Holy Land, my identity and status have always been won by myself. With my own strength, I have achieved the fame I am now. Quote. I am honored to have fear, in the eyes of my kin, you. Tianlongren, it's just a name, I don't care. After saying these words quietly, he glanced at Dylan's, who quickly stepped forward and lifted Monet up. As for this mouse, no. This chapter is not over, click on the next page to continue reading. When they met, they seemed mysterious and powerful, but now. There was a contemptuous smile on Yang Qing's face. What a humble and pitiful person. Kill him. Suddenly, Yang Qing spoke. The cold tone caused all the Tianlong people present to be startled, and then startled. Dylan's didn't hesitate at all. The dagger in his hand flashed suddenly and slashed towards Monet's neck. Whoosh. A figure suddenly appeared, followed by 5 or 6 figures next to the two of them. Their speed was extremely fast, and they blocked in front of Dylan's dagger almost instantly. Oh, Dylan's flashed a hint of depression in his eyes, and then smiled mockingly. Space shift. Boom. Help. Seeing 7 figures appearing, Monet's eyes filled with hope and he said loudly. But in an instant, the 7 people who had just appeared 10 meters away in the next moment, causing their faces to be shocked. Watching helplessly, the dagger in Dylan's hand slashed towards Monet's neck. Poof. A slight voice spread throughout the arena, and a bright flower of blood was thrown down. The people present were startled, and then fell silent. Chapter 133 Trading. Bright flowers of blood floated in the air, and then fell to the ground, dyeing the ground under Monet's feet scarlet. The faint smell of blood began to spread, and all the Tianlong people present were silent. Their pupils widened, and they seemed unable to believe it. It wasn't until Monet covered his throat with his hands and made a sound from his mouth that he fell softly to the ground, his eyes slowly losing their luster. Simple, direct, rude. I like this way of handling. I wonder how you guys feel. Yang Qing said lightly with a smile on her face. The Tianlong people present shuddered. looking at this unreasonable, unscrupulous, and chaotic fellow clan in front of him, a little scared. With strength and such a terrifying character, it is really a headache. The most important thing is, how should they face it? He once said the amazing words, "People are equal." He seems to have been disdainful of the identity of Tianlong people since he was born. He always believes in his own strength, and because of this, he worked hard, and finally he left the Holy Land and became a pirate, and now he has become a world-famous pirate. Just one person standing here can shock the entire Heavenly Dragon Holy Land. Alpha originally thought that in the future, this child would take a path that is considered normal among the dragon people, and treat other human beings with kindness and kindness. This situation is not unique. Many Tianlong people are actually very friendly. As the descendants of the 20 kings, they are widely distributed. It is not only the Tianlong people who live in the Holy Land called Tianlong people. The most typical example is the family of the King of Alabasta. They are also Tianlong people, but they are benevolent and friendly and maintain peace. He thought that Yangqing would take such a path. Although it was difficult, it would not work. But the fact hit him hard in the face. This child is far more thoughtful than he thought. His eyes looked calm, but upon closer inspection, he found that there was bottomless lake water inside. No one can see it, and no one can see it. The current scene made him see this child, a decisive and ruthless scene. It was also such a fierce aura that Alpha trembled in his heart. I have to admit that such a son is very good and makes him proud, but it also makes him faintly worried. Dylan's. Yangqing suddenly spoke, and he slowly walked towards the old man at the front. Dylan's nodded, and the 7 figures defending Monet were dazed at first, and then they attacked again. There are 7 figures with the same goal, all of them are Dylan's. But the latter didn't even pay much attention. He just turned his back to the 7 people, and the dagger in his hand trembled slightly. The space distorted for a moment, and in an instant, a dagger appeared under the necks of the 7 people. Poof! The 7 voices merged into one, blood sprayed, and the 7 people slowly fell to the ground, their eyes full of disbelief. In this scene, the Tianlong people who were present shrank their eyes again and made a silent gesture to stop the black-clothed men who were hiding in the dark and were about to come up to attack. The power gap is too great. These people are also those who have mastered the 6 forms, but they are so vulnerable under Dylan's. Dylan's came to Yangqing's side, his right hand trembled, the space above him trembled, and a huge jar appeared in his hand, which was then placed on the ground. This is the drink from the East China Sea. I invite you to drink it. Lu Ning picked up the jar with one hand, placed it heavily in front of the Tianlong old man, and sat down. Dylan's took out 2 more bowls. Yangqing after taking it, he placed a bowl in front of the old man. It's been a long time since I drank so rudely. Laotian Longren's eyes narrowed as he stared at Yangqing. I invite you to drink. If you don't drink, I'll cut you. Yangqing said very seriously and slowly, today, I'm in a hurry, I hope you don't force me to do things I don't want to do. There was a hint of helplessness in the old man's eyes, and then he adjusted his clothes, put the crutches aside, and slowly sat down in a cross, and ended up with the bowl in Yangqing's hand. Yangqing raised the huge wine jar with one hand, then poured a bowl for the 2 of them and placed them in front of their eyes. Please. Yangqing motioned, picked up the big bowl and drank it. The old man saw that Yangqing was so massive, his eyes trembled slightly, and then he had no choice but to pick up the drink and put it in his mouth. The old man has never been forced like this before. The old man said slowly. Ha ha ha, according to seniority, should I call you grandpa? Yangqing laughed. Yes, you should call me grandpa. The old man nodded. I can really take care of the internal affairs of the Tianlong people, but you said that you want to make a deal with me. The old Tianlong person shook his head and smiled. Under such persecution, I can't count any transactions. Your cleverness should understand this truth. Yangqing nodded. Yes, an equal transaction between the 2 parties cannot be completed under strong pressure. When I was a child, I once said, all men are equal, and I taught my younger brother this. I want the world to understand that between people, apart from everything outside, their personalities are equal, and they all have the right to choose. For example, in the face of strong pressure, they can choose to fight, or to give in. Tianlong people, human beings, their personalities are all the same, they are all human, no one is better than the other in essence first class. This, in fact, the long history has proved it. Quote, such as One Piece Roger, such as Whitebeard, these people standing at the top of the world, they are not Tianlong people, but you can say that they are not noble. Not powerful. No, no one can deny their great deeds. Old man of Tianlong smiled and nodded. What you said is right, but you are standing in the sky. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. In such a top position as a dragon man, to say this sentence is to judge the clan, it is to subvert, and it is impossible to be recognized. No, you probably didn't understand what I meant. Yang Qing's eyes narrowed, and then a trace of domineering rose from his body and spread around. Buzz. A circle of domineering waves, the standing Tianlong people fell to the ground except for the Alpha family. I just want to say that equality of status is earned by oneself, not born. Chapter 134 3 Bowls of Wine. Lao Shenlongren's eyes narrowed slightly, and then fell into silence. After a long time, he said, add wine. Yang Qing lifted the wine jar with one hand, added another bowl to Lao Shenlongren, and then added another bowl to himself. The two lifted the wine, touched it heavily, and then drank it all in one go. I don't agree with what you said. It is true that the Tianlong people are superior to others after the shot. This is a fact that you can't change. The old Tianlongren said lightly, and then he looked at Yang Qing. Don't forget, Lucifer, the blood flowing in your blood is also the blood of Tianlong people, the descendants of the 20 kings. Quote. Yang Qing shrugged. I've never denied this, I'm a heavenly dragon, that's right. Huh. Lao Shenlongren looked at Yang Qing unexpectedly. Then what kind of pirate are you? I like it, I'm happy. Yang Qing said indifferently. I think, people are equal, low status can face equal conversation with high status, and don't feel inferior because of their own status. The weak dare to point the nose of the strong and scolded the mother, not trembling because of the difference in strength. This is how I understand it. Quote. Your thinking is too naive, this is impossible. Human beings are born with all kinds of desires and desires. As long as there are desires and desires, there will be differences, and there will be fear and fear. This is human nature. Lao Shenlongren seeing through everything, he explained softly, Tianlong people are high above, you can't change. Yang Qing squinted, then smiled. Indeed, as I grew up, I gradually discovered that the thoughts I had when I was a child were very naive, very cute, and very naive. It is impossible to achieve true meaning between people. This is an objective fact. Quote. Then you are now. The Tianlong man raised his head and asked. I came to the Holy Land again just for revenge. Yang Qing looked at Monet, then smiled. Obviously, it's been done, and secondly, it's to make a deal with you. What deal? The topic returned to the topic from a pointless nonsense. First, I will let you go. The garbage that fell on the ground. Yang Qing narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, for the safety of my parents and my brother's family. The old Tianlong man tightened his body, stared at Yang Qing and said slowly, your murderous aura is very heavy. It's very heavy. I only brought a sword to the Holy Land this time, with a brother who depends on life and death. Yang Qing said with a smile, if you don't agree, I will kill them all until there is no threat. You agree. Well, that's all good to talk about. The old man of Tianlong frowned tightly. After a long time, he nodded. I promise you that everything in the Alpha family will not be implicated by you. Second, I need to leave here safely, and I want you to hide everything that happened in the Holy Land. Yang Qing said. It's not easy, you are making such a big noise. The Tianlong old man glanced around, looking at a large number of people who fell unconscious on the ground, and said in a deep voice. I believe you can do it. Yang Qing's eyes were cold, with a smile on her face. The old man nodded, very helpless. He knew that this time he was completely forced. Thirdly, in my future actions, the Tianlong people must not interfere with me, and in return, I will not shoot at you again. This condition is the only one that I agree with. The old man nodded. These are my conditions. Next, you propose what I need to do. Since it is a transaction, then we have to agree with each other. Yang Qing said. There was a trace of surprise in the old man's eyes, and then a smile appeared on Yang Qing's face. I have to say, your character is very charming. Then, I have to think about it. For a while, the scene fell silent. The Alpha family watched this scene quietly, watching Yang Qing and the old man's face-to-face transaction, filled with emotion. This original child, at this moment, has grown to the point where he is now, which is indeed very impressive. I still remember his nonsense at that time. Everyone just took it as a joke, but now, he already has the qualifications and strength to make himself and the others truly equal. Human beings are equal. With his own efforts and powerful strength, he makes others have to agree. He has reached the stage of standing in front of others and being equal, and when others stand in front of him, he can give others the same equality. This is a huge change that has shocked countless people. After a full 3 minutes, the old Tianlongren spoke up, and his words made Yang Qing stunned. My conditions are very simple. From today, when you return to the Tianlong family, I will arrange it to open a new family for you and officially break away from the Alpha family. The Tianlong old man said with a smile, his smile full of old fox feeling. What? In the presence, whether it was the Alpha family, Dylan's, or Yang Qing, they were all shocked. After making such a big mistake, the old man even let him return to the clan, and even opened a branch for him. This is simply incredible, and it is unbelievable to think about it. Are you crazy? Dylan's exclaimed involuntarily. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, then stared at the old man in front of him and gritted his teeth. You really are an old fox. However, I can't refuse. Ha ha ha, you are a match, young man, you are still a little tender. The old man laughed loudly, then took the bowl up, add wine. Yang Qing threw the wine jar directly into the sky with one hand, his right hand trembled slightly, the wine jar stopped directly in the air, and the wine was thrown down. When it reached the top of the two people's heads, the wine spontaneously divided into 2 columns, and then faced each other. The wine bowls for the 2 of them are poured into it. In just a short while, the bowl has been filled. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Full of wine. Bang! The 2 wine bowls collided heavily, and the wine was spilled. The next moment, the 2 raised the bowl together, and then drank this glass of wine together, making an agreement on 3 bowls of wine. A transaction, so easy to reach. After all, Lao Shenlongren has lived for so many years. Although he is not strong, his mind is very flexible. Yang Qing's 3 conditions for persecution, although they are all innocuous little problems, but if such a riot in the Holy Land, if it spreads out, it will bring shame to the entire Holy Land. So they don't need to say Yang Qing, they will help him cover up spontaneously. As for the old man asking Yang Qing to return to the Holy Land and establishing a clan for him, this move is of great significance. The strength of the Tianlong people is weak, and they rely on outsiders to defend them. However, if there is a world-class giant earthquake, there is no doubt that the Tianlong people will immediately fall into a dangerous situation. Chapter 135 Use. And Yang Qing's strength is strong, coupled with his identity as a Tianlong person. Under the observation of the old man, he is not a ruthless person, and he does not recognize his 6 relatives. If you let him join the Tianlong people, it will be invisible to the outside world, and even the sea soldiers of the Tianlong people, the World Imperial Court, will form a powerful deterrent. For so many years, if it wasn't for the constant suppression of the upper-level people, I am afraid that whether it is the sea soldiers or the World Court, there have already been internal problems. Since ancient times, any class, without the defense of armed forces and strong deterrence, will become vulnerable. The reason why the Tianlong people have gradually become inferior to one generation is that the fundamental reason is that one is their spontaneous degeneration, and the other is that all parties are either invisible, or openly suppressed in conspiracy. When their older generation found out, it was already too late. There is no doubt that Yang Qing will definitely occupy a place in the New World in the future, and the potential is extremely huge. Such a person, the old man will naturally not let go. I hope you don't rush to announce my identity as a Tianlong person, Yang Qing said with a flickering eye after drinking the bowl of wine. The old man naturally knows. Don't worry. The old man of Tianlong nodded. At any time, he must have a whole card. Yang Qing is the last whole card of the Tianlong person. Naturally, the old man will not be foolishly exposed. Then, I'll go first, and I'll leave the rest to you. Yang Qing stood up, turned his head and left here. The Tianlongren sat cross-legged on the ground, looking at the wine jar in the sky with its mouth down, but never falling on the ground. His eyes flickered. What kind of strength has this kid reached? From the perspective of momentum, it doesn't even have to be a strong general. When the figures of Yang Qing and Dylan's gradually disappeared from the eyes of the old man, the wine jar trembled, and then fell to the ground with a pop, and it was torn apart. 5 old men, Lucifer. At this moment, Alpha just walked over and said respectfully to the old man. Don't worry, your son is extraordinary. Wu Lao sighed and waved his hand. You have given birth to a good son. Maybe he will become our Tianlong people's last hope and seed. Quote. What? Alpha was startled, and then Jason his present were also unbelievable. The Tianlong people are too popular. Everything is going to be reversed, and the prosperity will decline. Listening to the reputation of the Tianlong people in the world at this moment, all of them are notorious for their brutality and ferocity. What does this mean? It means that the Tianlong people are dangerous. Yes. When one day, the truth is known, and the weak really have the courage that the kid said, we will only usher in destruction. The 5 elders said solemnly. Can't it be changed? Alpha asked. It's too late, too many straws have been pressed on the camel's back. This is the general trend, unless someone has the ability to turn the world upside down. Wu Lao shook his head, and then he leaned on a cane and slowly left here. Fortunately, there is such a lad. Alpha stared blankly at the back of the 5 elders, remembered Yang Qing's audacity, and was also amazed in his heart. Even he himself had to admire his son. This kid is really proud of himself. Don't care what happened to him. What happened to him? That's his own son. Others, hee, does your son have the ability to make trouble? Slowly, the Tianlong people on the ground woke up. When they saw Yang Qing and Dylan's both leave, the group sighed heavily, and then they aimed at Alpha. Alpha, your son treats us so cruelly. Alpha, you have to make an explanation. I'm not going around your son, Alpha, he's humiliating us all. Facing these ugly faces, Alpha just sneered, and then left here with Jace and his wife, even ignoring those people of the same race. Outside the Holy Land, Dylan's and Yang Qing quickly ran towards the Chambord Islands. I really didn't expect that there are such unfathomable people among the Tianlong people. On the way, Yang Qing said solemnly, thinking of the Tianlong person just now, he actually felt a little trembling in his heart. Boss, do you mean the old man just now? I can't see anything, he looks very ordinary. Dylan said suspiciously. Because of this, it is even more terrifying. Yang Qing said seriously. He actually let you join the Tianlong people, do you really agree? Dylan's asked again. The figures of the 2 galloped quickly, and the things on both sides quickly moved towards the rear. Why don't you agree? That old guy wants me to join the Tianlong people and then use me. Yang Qing sneered, he wants to use me, why don't I use them? The identity of the Tianlong people is still very useful at this time. Yes. Dylan's eyes lit up, and then smiled. Haha, I understand, boss, you want to vigorously develop your power in the new world. Dylan silently gave Yang Qing 108 likes in his heart. In this way, no matter what, they will not suffer. On the Chambord Islands. Along the shore, a tall man riding a bicycle finally approached here. Behind him was a series of ice-covered roads. It's finally here. Ching Pheasant Kuzan rubbed his head, looked at the thick smoke and the big explosion on the island, and sighed. It seems that the situation is already serious. It's unbelievable that they can be so troublesome. Riding his own bicycle, Aokiji quickly headed towards the island. Trace. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. On the special side, he constantly observed all the movements in the positions where the dozens of cards were located, and the sweat dripped from his forehead. It can be said that in this large-scale battle plan, his role was the hardest and the most dangerous. Once discovered, he, a man who seems to have given countless eyes to the enemy, is undoubtedly the first target to be removed. At this moment, 100 meters behind him, a figure suddenly appeared here. Seeing Drizzy's back, the figure was stunned for a moment, then a chill flashed in his eyes, and a big cruel smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. I am so lucky. I actually met you here, then I'll harvest you. It's a harvest. Chapter 136 Dangerous Drizzt. The figure slowly took a step towards Drizzy's back. With his movements, the sand and dust behind it fluttered up and condensed into a rope-like sandstorm. The golden hook on his right hand flickered in the sunlight. With an icy blue light, this person is Crocodile. The accidental encounter made Crocodile immediately recognize Drizzy's identity. And without hesitation, he launched an attack, and the violent sand and dust slammed into Drizzy's back like a flood. There is no doubt that if you are hit by this attack, you will not be killed or seriously injured. Drizzy's forehead was full of sweat, and his spirit was completely concentrated on the cards. When the terrifying attack approached a range of 5 meters beside him, all the hairs on Drizzy's body suddenly popped up, and there was hardly any trace of it. Hesitating, he waved his hand, put away the cards on the ground, and then a donkey rolled around to the left. Boom! Sand and dust flew out from the sky, and a huge crater appeared where Drizzt was originally. The latter looked at the place where he was before, and the beads of sweat on his face immediately rubbed down, and his face turned blue with fright. Then he looked at the source of the attack, and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Sand Crocodile, Drizzt said coldly. That's right, it's me. I didn't expect to meet someone from the Death God Pirates here. I'm really surprised. Crocodile laughed loudly, and the dust behind him gathered and moved towards Drizzt. Attacked away, like a long snake, spitting out its core and launching an attack. Drizzy's body is flexible, showing a domineering look, running around to avoid the attack of the sand and dust. It's really tough enough. Crocodile's eyes narrowed when he saw Drizzy's figure, and then his entire body turned into a sandstorm, shouting, a huge sandstorm. In just 1 second, where Crocodile was, the sand and dust from the sky blew up and attacked Drizzt. The latter's face changed greatly. This time, the coverage area was too large. The sandstorm with a radius of 30 or 40 meters was difficult to avoid, especially at this time. The distance between the two was very close. With a blink of his eyes, Drizzt ran into the empty room beside him. The sandstorm slammed into the house, knocking it down. At the same time, Drizzt jumped out of the window in the house. Out, and then gritted his teeth and threw a scarlet card to the back. 5 elements rotation, I bet. With a loud shout, the scarlet card flashed all over the sky, heading towards the sandstorm. It exploded after 3 seconds, and to Crocodile's surprise, a large number of water droplets burst out from the card, which made his elementalization and sandstorm weaken immediately, and his body also appeared. Immediately afterwards, 3 cards floated over, also flashing scarlet light. In my name, swear to the air. Drizzy's shout came again, and Crocodile's pupils shrank suddenly. Then he saw the 3 cards in front of him suddenly disappear into the air. The next moment, his pupils widened and his head tilted slightly to the right. It was this crook that saved his sex name. The 3 cards appeared almost instantly, with a strong wind, whirling past his neck. This kid. Crocodile was startled. He didn't expect Drizzt to have such a terrifying power. Woohoo! Drizzt stood on the roof, looking down at Crocodile, who was drenched in soup, his eyes were full of solemnity. Just now, it was just good luck. Lucky bet out of water before he could hurt the other party. Next time, he won't know. Naturally, it is really stressful. Sassy sassy. The water droplets on Crocodile's body were slowly absorbed, and the sand and dust flew up again. His right hand stretched out, and the sand and dust were directed towards Drizzt, more and more, densely packed. Filled the sky, extending towards the latter. A card was thrown quickly, and the scarlet light erupted again. This time it was a shining explosion, and the sky was full of sparks, but it had no effect on the dust. Hee hee, it turned out to be luck. Crocodile sneered, his lower body turned into dust and drifted towards Drizzt. Drizzt's eyes were cautious, and he constantly scanned the surroundings, looking for a place to hide, but there was no doubt that there was nothing but the buildings full of eyes, and there was no way to take the sandstorm. This rotten crocodile is really bad for me. It's really bad now, and I can't monitor the situation of the sailors on the entire island. Drizzt's forehead was dripping with sweat. He took out the phone bug and said quickly, "Captain, I am entangled in crocodile, be careful all of you." Then, he quickly ran on the roofs of various houses. Crocodile's grains of sand were even more terrifying than his hidden weapons, and he dared not let its sand touch him, otherwise he would definitely be turned into a mummy. I still have 2 trump cards, but it's not worth wasting on him. Drizzt's eyes flickered, and he glanced fiercely at Crocodile, who had an arrogant face behind him, and followed him closely. Its terrifying sandstorm, after passing such a long distance, has become larger and larger. Looking at it faintly, it actually covered the sky, with a radius of 200 or 300 meters. The sky was turned into darkness, and the momentum was very shocking. On the street, countless pedestrians ran up and ran towards their houses. In the forest, Aokiji, who was riding a bicycle, also saw the sandstorm above his head. Ah, is this a sandstorm? How can there be a sandstorm in the Chambord Islands? When his eyes moved, Qingzi thought of a person, which made him scratch his head again in distress. It's Crow. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Is it Kettle? It's really annoying. The front of the car was turned around, and the green pheasant was temporarily heading towards the center of the dust storm. Yang Qing and Dylan's were rushing towards the Chambord Islands at the moment. When they heard Drizzt's words suddenly, their expressions changed drastically. Crocodile, Yang Qing said coldly. He quickly asked the phone bug, "Tell me your location, Drizzt." Drizzt faintly heard Yang Qing's words, but the constantly attacking sand and dust did not give him the slightest chance to respond. Drizzt, please answer if you hear me. Where are you? Tell us, and we'll go to support you right away. That damned crocodile. Drizzt was almost furious, but there was nothing he could do. With a wave of his hand, he threw 5 cards to his back again, but his luck was extremely bad. 3 flames, 2 of which were actually sand and dust, exploded, causing no damage to Crocodile at all. Chapter 137 The Arrival of the Green Pheasant. Instead, with a wave of his hand, Crocodile directed a large amount of sand and dust to blow up the house under his feet, making Drizzt's face pale with fright. The longer the time dragged on, the more dangerous Drizzt became. The amount of sand and dust in the sky increased, making Drizzt's eyes full of yellow sand all the time. This guy. Drizzt realized that Crocodile was difficult and terrifying, and there was really no easy person in the nature department. Drizzt, tell us where you are. We've reached the Chambord Islands. Yang Qing's voice came from the phone bug quickly, making Drizzt's eyes light up. Then, he looked around, saw the huge tree in front of him, and immediately shouted, "I am under the tallest tree in the Chambord archipelago, you can see it at a glance." Yang Qing and Dylan's breathed a sigh of relief after hearing Drizzt's words clearly. They were really afraid that something would happen to Drizzt. Crocodile and the others knew very well that although this guy was nothing to them, the abilities of the nature department were still terrifying. Dylan's, get there quickly. I have already seen that huge tree. Yang Qing looked up and could clearly see the tallest tree in the Chambord archipelago. Above it, countless bubbles popped, shattered. I saw it too. Dylan's nodded, then pulled Yongqing up and took a step forward. The space distorted, and the figures of the two disappeared here. There is still some distance from the big tree here, and it is estimated that it will take a lot of time to reach it. As for the green pheasant, riding a bicycle and following the constantly flying sand and dust, it was getting closer and closer. He also saw the two people who were constantly fighting in the air, and there was a ray of deep thought in their eyes. It turned out to be these two people. Crocodile, the card master Drizzt. They are all vicious big pirates. Aokiji murmured. There is no doubt that these two people are not simple characters. Death God Drizzt of the pirates, not to mention his own abilities, just such a name can scare a large group of people. As for Crocodile, the natural ability of its own rustling fruit is even more powerful, which has been noticed by the Marines, and the latter has been designated as one of the preliminary Wuhai Reserve personnel. Glancing at the chaos on the street, Aokiji patted his forehead and stopped his bicycle. But, you can't let you cause riots like this. With a flash, he rushed towards the two people in the sky. In the sky, the sandstorm of Crocodile has completely surrounded Drizzt's figure. The cards in Drizzt's hand kept throwing out, creating ripples, causing the sandstorm to drop to the ground. The latter's face became gloomy, and he had a hunch that if it continued like this, he didn't have to imagine what would happen to him. Isn't the boss here yet? If it goes on like this, I can only use this card. Drizzt thought solemnly, a little king looming in his right hand. This is a card that is more powerful than A, and the power on it, I am afraid that one card can clear the enemy in front of you. But Drizzt was very reluctant to use it. This card was prepared for the most critical moment of retreat. In his heart, Crocodile was just a little person who was not worth mentioning. The air was getting more and more dull, and Drizzt saw Crocodile's figure emerging from the dust. The first thing that appeared was his face, and then his arms and body, all in front of him, stretched out towards him a golden hook that shone with faint blue light. What a despicable fellow, Drizzt sighed, the little king in his right hand showing. He really doesn't want to use this card. You two, it's enough. At this moment, a lazy voice suddenly rang out, causing the two of them to tremble, followed by a piercing chill that made both of them tremble. Then they saw that a large piece of blue ice was extending from the sand and dust from below, covering it directly, making a constant, click, 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 sound. In an instant, Crocodile's complexion changed, and he withdrew from here, and the dust in the sky suddenly disappeared. Drizzt also flashed and jumped to the roof next to him. He turned his eyes and looked at the person who came. After that, his pupils shrank immediately. General, Aokiji. Crocodile's eyes narrowed as well, and then he laughed. What a surprise, it actually alarmed the general. You two are making such a big noise. Do you really think that the sea soldiers don't exist? Qingzi glanced around. A large area of houses collapsed, and there were still fine dust floating in the sky, and couldn't help but have a headache. It's really a piece of land. Messy, so you hateful pirates are really the biggest trouble. Drizzt's hands trembled and he put away the little king's cards, but his eyes became more solemn. I'd rather face Crocodile than the general. This card of his may not necessarily have much effect on the general. Even if the remaining two big and small kings attack together, it will not necessarily have much effect on the green pheasant. You two, I'm going to catch it. I'm afraid, this time you have to enter the advanced city. A chill flashed in Qingzi's eyes, and the air around him suddenly became cold. Under his feet, in the air, ice cubes began to extend toward the two of them, and a saber made of ice cubes also appeared in Aokiji's right hand. He slowly moved his pace, first staring at K. Rockdale. There is no doubt that for Aokiji, Crocodile of the Nature Department has a greater advantage. Swish. In just a flash, the figure of the green pheasant has arrived in Crocodile. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. In front of him, the latter's complexion changed drastically, and the golden hook in his right hand waved violently. Crack. The green pheasant was extremely fast and grabbed the golden hook directly. Then, With a wave of the ice saber, it cut through Crocodile's stomach, revealing that the dust was flowing down. When Crocodile was stunned, Aokiji's right leg stretched out and kicked him directly. On the way out, the dark armament color was already attached to it. Bang! The elementalized crocodile was directly kicked away by more than 20 meters, and rolled heavily on the ground. After stopping, Crocodile was shocked and terrified. Such a neat, straightforward solution to Crocodile made Drizzt on the side stunned. Aokiji turned around, and then turned his gaze to Drizzt, who was shocked, and the next moment, Drizzt's eyes had lost the figure of Aokiji. Swish! The ice saber appeared in front of Drizzt's face, and his face changed greatly. At this moment, he couldn't escape no matter what. Too fast. Aokiji's speed is so fast that Drizzt can't react. Chapter 138 Fighting the Green Pheasant. Buzz. At this moment, a faint blue light suddenly flashed in the space on the side, directly blocking the middle of Aokiji's ice saber and Drizzt. A dragon flickered between the rays of light, and when it attacked, it seemed as if a dragon was roaring and roaring, shaking the surrounding space. When Aokiji's face froze, and he turned his eyes to the front. There, the two figures slowly showed their bodies, and a light laughter also came out. You're about to be hacked to death, where's your attention? Drizzt. Captain, you are finally here. Drizzt let out a heavy sigh with a smile on his face. Yongqing and Dylan's appeared on the field with smiles. The ice blue blade directly blocked Qingzi's ice saber, catching the latter's ultimate move steadily. And Dylan's took a step forward, standing behind the green pheasant, and surrounded the latter faintly. It's troublesome now. Qingzi's eyes flashed, he put away his ice saber, and looked at the three in front of him. Drizzt, you continue your mission, gather everyone together, we are ready to evacuate. Yongqing said with a smile. Drizzt's eyes lit up, and then he said loudly, is it done? Yes, hurry up, Drizzt, this crocodile, I'll watch him. Dylan stood in front of Crocodile, staring at the latter coldly, making the latter's whole body tense. Stand up. Then I'll withdraw. Drizzt ran away and quickly disappeared here. Aokiji quietly watched Drizzt run away, but did not catch up. In front of him, the long sword flickered with a cold breath, forcing him to stand on the spot and unable to move. Let's play a trick, Qing Pheasant. Yongqing said casually. The long sword trembled slightly, and directly drew 10 light beams in the air, rushing towards the green pheasant. The latter's footsteps moved, and the blue aura above the ice saber was very strong, and the severe cold directly covered a large area under his feet. Silently spread towards Yongqing, there is no doubt that if it is bitten by this breath, it will be frozen into a large block of ice in an instant. Yongqing's facial expression remained unchanged, and the long sword in his right hand drew an afterimage, constantly in contact with the ice saber in Qingzi's hand, making a sonorous sound. He lifted his right foot and slammed into the ground below. Buzz! The air trembled, and a large area of land began to turn upside down and swept away towards the green pheasants. Let the latter's complexion change immediately and jump towards the rear. In just an instant, the green pheasant was 30 meters away. Watching the turbulent earth gradually regain its stability, a dignified light flashed in his eyes just now. Can you control everything around you? It's really an incredible ability. Aokiji said solemnly. In the rear, above Dylan's dagger, there was already a trace of pitch-black mist, and the back of Crocodile was full of sand, and the wind and sand were blowing Dylan's robes, but his face was expressionless. Taking one step, Dylan's disappeared directly into the air, causing Crocodile's pupils to shrink instantly. What about people? Poof! The cold light flashed, and there was a blood stain on Crocodile's left arm. Cold sweat quietly fell from Crocodile's forehead, Dylan's right hand trembled, and the space suddenly twisted. Then his right hand swung out, and Crocodile paled in shock. After the man's right hand moved, his own suddenly changed position, appearing directly in front of Dylan's eyes, and he was facing the dagger stuck between his eyebrows. Without hesitation, Crocodile elementalized and ran to the side. The dagger slashed, and a trace of blood flowed out. A trace of pain appeared on Crocodile's face, and then he turned into a maddening sand and quickly fled to the side. He was already afraid. First Aokiji, then Dylan's, both of them could crack his elementalization, and their abilities were stronger than himself. As long as the Green Hills are left, there is no need to worry about no firewood, and Crocodile naturally understands this truth. Dylan's took a step forward and followed closely behind Crocodile. He almost crossed the distance of space, like teleportation. Along the way, the dagger kept waving, blood kept spilling, Crocodile's face was painful, and his heart was burning with anger, but there was no way to do it. However, Yangqing and Qingzi also fought an extremely fierce battle. Your growth really surprised me. Qingzi's face was dignified. The ice saber in his hand resisted the pressure on the ice blue long sword. The two weapons contacted, and the cold air was blowing, and it kept shaking and humming. Voice. Everyone changes, doesn't it? Yangqing replied with a smile. His left hand trembled slightly, and everything around him trembled. Everything within a radius of 20 meters trembled violently. The earth, houses, and trees were all rumbling, and after a breath, they attacked the green pheasant. Let the latter slightly change color. This strange ability. The icy chill quietly spread through Aokiji's body in all directions. Yangqing's long sword, the chaotic scene behind it, was covered with frost in an instant, making a click sound, and then Yangqing's attack stopped. In just an instant, the radius of 100 meters was enveloped by a layer of white aura. Huh, it's really cold. Yangqing took a step back and exhaled gently. Seeing that everything around him has become a world of frost, half of Aokiji's face is also covered with thick frost, and he can't help but become dignified. The top of his long sword is also covered with frost at the moment, which looks very brittle and also affects the speed. In light clothes. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Unable to stop the icy chill, Yangqing felt that his actions became stiff. Every breath was filled with white mist. Boom. Yangqing put away his long sword, slowly put it into the scabbard, and then snapped his fingers with his right hand, and a circle of light covering a radius of 2 kilometers spread out. After the hum sound, everything within 2,000 meters was under his control and became his domain. Taking a step forward, Yangqing's figure disappeared and instantly appeared in front of Qingzi. The latter's eyes narrowed, and the ice saber swung out. Yangqing's fists turned into claws, and he firmly grasped the ice saber that was harder than steel. Crack! Under this grasp, a strange force swept out, and the ice saber was directly smashed into pieces. Aokiji's pupils shrank suddenly, and then his left hand trembled in the air, and another ice saber appeared instantly, and stabbed directly into Yangqing's head. Broken. Yangqing clenched his left hand tightly. The air swayed violently, Qingzi's fast-moving wrist trembled violently, and the ice saber in his hand shattered into pieces again. Chapter 139 The General's Terrifying. This scene made Qingzi's face change again, staring at Yangqing's face. He could feel a force in just a moment, and he controlled his advancing right arm. If it weren't for his own desperate resistance, his mouth would. What the consequences will be, I can't even imagine myself. What the hell is this guy's ability? Qingzi's hands trembled, broke free from the inexplicable force, and patted Yangqing with both hands. During the slap, a terrifying cold air swept through, covering his palms with thick layers of frost, and everything that these palms touched would turn into ice. Yangqing was not afraid at all. His palms were raised at the same time, and the mask that spread out suddenly closed at this moment. At an incredible speed, all gathered on his palms, and then an inexplicable wave came out. With the slap of his palms, it hit Qingzi's palms mercilessly. Armed and domineering, Aokiji's pupils shrank, and, inexplicable fruit ability. He saw the frost on his arm, which was actually controlled by a strange force, and then quickly turned into hard ice cones, slowly floating in the air, turned around at a very fast speed, and slammed towards him. Inserted all over. Puff puff. A dense voice sounded, and Aokiji's whole body turned into ice cubes and shattered to the ground. Yang Qing strode forward, his right foot was raised suddenly, and the air moved a little, and the surrounding earth turned into a strong right leg with this lift, and then fell down suddenly. Boom! The giant legs formed by the earth, more than 30 meters long and 1 meter thick, directly smashed on top of the ice blocks formed by the green pheasants. The slag was all over the place, and the figure that made the latter slowly recover shattered again. Ice Age. Among the shattered ice cubes, Aokiji's head was formed first, and these 4 words were uttered indifferently in his mouth. Then, Yang Qing's pupils shrank suddenly, and the whole person kept jumping towards the back. A terrifying cold current surging, directly enveloped a large area. In an instant, the 2,000-meter land was completely covered by ice, and the icy chill continued to expand. Towards where Yang Qing was, it spread at an extremely terrifying speed. 3 seconds later, it was already at Yang Qing's feet, and then his expression changed, and then the cold current bit his leg instantly. Click. The subtle freezing sound kept ringing, and in less than a second, Yang Qing's whole body was frozen. In the distance, Aokiji's figure slowly stood up from the ice, and his burly figure strode towards here. It's really a tough guy. If it wasn't for your arrogance, you wouldn't have cultivated enough. I'm afraid it would be even more difficult to deal with. Qing Pheasant's face was serious, and he walked quickly towards the place where Yang Qingbing was frozen. Dylan's, give up crocodile, in front of that guy, there are a large number of Marines, 5 lieutenant generals, their support has come from the headquarters, we should retreat. From the phone bug in front of Dylan's, Drizzy's voice came out, causing the latter's complexion to change before turning his head and leaving here. Go to Luo and gather them together. Dylan's nodded, then followed Drizzy's guidance and walked quickly in Luo's direction. Drizzt was hiding in a more secluded place at the moment. He kept observing the Chambord archipelago. After seeing Yang Qing being frozen by the green pheasant, his eyes shrank, and then he let go, and he didn't pay any more attention. His gaze turned to the 3 of Analu. General, it really lives up to its reputation. These 3 people, together, were really scary enough. Drizzt let out a long breath and sighed. You 3 rubbish. Akainu roared loudly, the lava rolling out of his body. At this moment, the 10-li radius of the 4 people's battle has become a scorched black, and the flaming flames are constantly burning. These are all caused by the large-scale attacks of Analu and Akainu, and the countless deep pits and odd-shaped potholes on the ground are the masterpieces of Bucky and Glades. Woo-hoo! Bucky and Glades gasped, sweat dripping from their bodies. 3-on-1, this old guy is so tenacious, too strong. You know, we have this guy here, Bucky said loudly. Up to now, the 3 of them are still in 3 corners, surrounding Sakazuki. As for the other sailors, they all lay on the ground with their eyes rolled, their faces and bodies covered in charred black. The strength of these Marines is very good, at least against Bucky, and Glades is still very entangled, but in the end, he was directly knocked down by Analu with a big move. Moreover, I can also say that his abilities are completely restricted, but my ability development is not enough. Now, I can only extinguish part of his flames, and there is no way to completely target him. Glades said solemnly. 3-on-1, as it is now, the opposite side is only slightly injured. It can be said that this time they have thoroughly experienced the horror of the general. Where's Drizzt? We've been entangled with the general now, it's been almost half an hour, how is the boss? Bucky yelled, he was about to be paralyzed, facing the general, the pressure was too great, several times in between, he was almost burned to a mass of coke. You hold on, we have already begun to prepare to evacuate, Deputy Captain, we are gathering Luo and the others. Drizzy's voice came from the phone bug, causing Bucky to let out a heavy sigh, and if he continued to call, he really had no physical strength. That boy Analu is really strong, Glades said in admiration, and Bucky nodded. This chapter is not over, click on the next page to continue reading. In the field, Enel and Sakazuki, who were still fighting, were simply insane. The 2 of them are the most explosive and aggressive fruits in the natural system. Every time they collide, they are accompanied by countless lightning and sparks. The scene is so spectacular and majestic. Go on. The two took a breath and rushed towards Sakaski again. Vacuum extinguishing wave. Fractured. Lei Ying. Ah, you three bastards. Sakaski was simply furious, restrained everywhere. The domineering punch on his right hand shattered Bucky's ability wave, and the flame on his right arm was directly extinguished by Glades. Following that, his left hand slammed into the thunderbolt struck by Anilu. Sticks, flames, magma fell to the ground, and countless red bubbles appeared. With the left foot as the axis, the right foot kicked out violently, directly forcing the three back. Then, Sakaski threw another fierce punch at Glades, spitting out blood from the latter and rolling over 10 times. Just as he was chasing, Bucky pounced again. Chapter 140. Prepare to evacuate. Helpless, Sakaski faced Bucky again. The two of them slammed into each other. Sakaski took a step back, the flames all over his body scattered, and Bucky flew out. Crap! Sakaski was furious, turned around, and on top of his pitch-black fists, began to face Anilu again. Glades, Bucky, and Anilu attacked very tightly, with very little time interval in between. Their abilities are also extremely terrifying. Under the continuous bombardment of the three people, Sakaski's was still fine, but he was slightly injured. I have to say that his strength is indeed terrifying. Put it on an ordinary person, even a lieutenant general, under the attack of these three people, I am afraid they will die. But Sakaski has nothing to do, and even has the upper hand. This is the general level of combat power. Whether it is his own strength, combat experience, or even reaction ability, the speed of his shots has reached a terrifying level. Crackling. Hot lightning filled Sakaski's body, causing his whole body to flash with blue electric light, and the dense magma slowly flowed towards Ani Road. The latter's face changed, turned into lightning and disappeared immediately, and the next second appeared on the left side of Sakaski, and knocked it down again with a stick. Out of the corner of the eye, Sakaski saw that Bucky and Glades, who had been blasted by him, had not changed, and a thick jet black armed color was immediately wrapped around his right fist. Violently hit Anilu. Anilu's face changed, and the long stick blocked it. Bang! The terrifying force directly bent the golden long stick in Enel's hand, and then the force swept through his whole body, causing the latter to spurt out a mouthful of blood. Anilu! Bucky shouted, and attacked Sakaski with his legs. Glades over there also took a breath and attacked together. Sakaski was helpless and could only continue to face the two. Although these three people are one-on-one, he doesn't need much effort, but the three of them together are too troublesome. There is no problem with the three of Anilu at the moment. Drizzt retracted his gaze, and then focused his attention on Dylan's. He saw that Dylan's had already made contact with the two of Luo and merged together. On your left, not far from Anilu and others, Robin and Mori are there. Just after Dylan's gathered with Luo and Corazon, Drizzy's voice rang. Let's go to Robin and the others. Dylan's nodded, and the three started to run. In 5 minutes, the three of them joined Robin Mariah. The three of Anilu are entangled. Moria pointed to the bombardment that was constantly coming from a distance. Leave it to me, you go back to the Reaper first, and we will meet later. Dylan's nodded, and then said to Drizzt, Drizzt, you also quickly return to the ship. Don't worry, I am very close to the Reaper. Drizzy's voice came from the phone bug, and everyone nodded. Then, Dylan separated from Luo and the others, and headed towards the place where Ani Road was. The green pheasant slowly walked towards the ice sculpture. Just as he was 5 meters away from Yangqing, the ice cubes on Yangqing's body suddenly made a crashing sound, and then shattered into ice cubes all over the sky, and a burst of ice burst into the sky. Under the control of an inexplicable force, it burst out, completely penetrating Aokiji's entire body. I knew it. What a headache. Aokiji turned into ice cubes, and then slowly recovered. The next moment, the figures of the two were entangled again, colliding with each other, and everything around them shook. The icy aura turned everything into ice cubes, and a strange wave trembled, controlling all the ice cubes to move. Facing you, ability doesn't seem to have much effect. Qingzi said, uncomfortable. I can control everything. Yang Qing said with a light smile, look. Buzz. Within a radius of 2 kilometers, all the trees rose from the ground, and the earth was rolled up like a mat, pressing towards the green pheasant. As far as he could see, everything formed a terrifying attack, and they all rushed towards the green pheasant, causing the latter's complexion to change slightly. Terrible ability, Qingzi said seriously, and then he ran away. Yang Qing is in control of everything, chasing the pace of the green pheasant. The land is turned up by him, everything that can be seen is his attack method. After being 50 meters away from Yang Qing, Qingzi turned around abruptly. Facing this overwhelming and terrifying attack, he pressed his right hand on the ground. Absolute zero. Call. The cold wind blew, and everything was frozen. The sweeping earth, trees, houses, everything, were frozen by this terrible cold. This icy cold air directly covered more than 5,000 meters, and this was the scene after Aokiji deliberately controlled it. Even, Yang Qing was frozen by even colder ice again. Click. The next moment, Yang Qing walked out of the ice, trembling all over, and his teeth began to chug. The ice of the green pheasant really made him freeze to death. Do you still want to fight? Yang Qing spat out these words from between his teeth. Captain, pay attention, the support of the Navy has arrived. 20 warships are approaching the coast. A large number of Navy soldiers are rushing towards here in Analu. We have to evacuate. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and then he smiled, tingling me. It's interesting. He slowly pulled out the Longchen sword behind him again, held the hilt with both hands, and pointed at Qingzi, try my sword. Aokiji stretched out his right hand. Out, the ice saber appeared again. The next moment, both of them took a step ahead. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Buzz. The air trembled, the two weapons touched each other again, and the space was shaken. In a radius of 100 meters, the earth suddenly collapsed, and smoke and dust rose from the sky. The green pheasant's face changed and rolled away towards the back. You actually absorbed my physical strength. Yang Qing let out a long laugh, strode forward, holding the sword in both hands. The binding true qi in his body spread to the tip of his sword, making the Longchen sword even more crystal clear. Then, the two started a continuous battle. The ground kept collapsing, and Aokiji's face became more and more ugly. That strange power caused the energy in his body to continuously drain. On the other hand, Yang Qing, who was facing him, seemed to be more and more energetic. This strange scene made him extremely dignified. The chill was still spreading, but it had no effect on Yang Qing, and was easily avoided by his fruit ability. Boss, prepare to evacuate. Luo and the others have already returned to the ship. Only you and Enelu are left. The sailors have already entered the island. Drizzy's voice rang out, and Yang Qing's eyes flashed, ready to evacuate.